Okay, good morning and welcome to the Storms, Flooding, and Sea Level Defense Conference. I'm Stas Margaronis, president of the Propeller Club of Northern California. My co-producer is Arvin Acharya. He is the president of the Society of American Military Engineers San Francisco Post, and I will be introducing him shortly. We are joined by Jim Patty, who is the president of the International Propeller Club, and Lieutenant Colonel Kevin Arnett, who is the chief engineer for the San Francisco District, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We are hoping that General Schrodel will join us shortly. And without further ado, I'm going to start off with just a few housekeeping things. At the end of each of our panel discussions, we'll be open for questions, and please use your chat function to ask the questions. We have a tight schedule, so if I can't get your questions answered, please send them to me, and I will address them to the person that you want to ask the questions of. So I'll just forward that, and hopefully they will answer your questions. We're going to be recording this. The recording will be available within 2 days. We will record the first half going to the 10 o'clock Pacific break. Joe, there he is. Okay, we have General Schrodel. And then the second half, there will be 2 segments, and we'll make those available. You'll also have the PowerPoints, and we have a break at 10 o'clock. And let me see. And so you should be able to get all of those from us. And if there's any questions or problems, please let me know and I will try and address them. I want to thank all of you for your participation and support in attending the 4th Storms, Flooding, and Sea Level Defense Conference, a co-production of the Propeller Club of Northern California and the Society of American Military Engineers San Francisco Post. Thank you also to our panelists who donated their time from their busy schedules to be with us today and share their research and knowledge. I want to thank same San Francisco Post President Arvin Acharya for his support and hard work. Arvin, I could not have done it without you, buddy. Thank you again very, very much. I also want to commend the support of Stantec's Jamil Ibrahim, Deltaris's Catherine Roscoe, our IT director, Todd Crawshaw, for coordinating this virtual conference. Todd, thank you very, very much for all of your help here. And our researcher, Kevin Policarpo. I also want to thank the board of directors of the Propeller Club of Northern California for their support of 4 conferences. I'm going to start with Ron Brown, who is the manager of business development and marketing at the Port of Oakland, a stalwart on our board of directors at the Propeller Club. Kimberly Cartagena, marketing coordinator, Centerline Logistics. Greg Feeney, business development, port transfer. Evie Wong, vice president, San Francisco division, Alba Wheels Up. Nick Marone, vice president, Seafarers International Union. Susan Ransom, I know she's on. Hi, Susan. Client Services Manager, SSA International. Susan Sullivan, Operations Manager, the Pasha Group. And Anita Yao, Wharfinger, Port of San Francisco. And Evie, I know you're there too. So thank you very much for being here. And my board, thank you for your patience and support. Finally, I want to thank our conference sponsors. Customs Brokers and Forwarders Association of Northern California, Mead and Hunt, Stantec, and Watermaster North America. Thank you all for your support and participation. And General Schrodel, I see you are here. So we are going to begin the segment where we have our welcome to the participants. And General, I want to thank you again for your support and the support of all of the same chapters that have supported this conference, on all of the good work that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has done in the past, and the challenges that you all and we all will be faced in the future. General Schrodel, Executive Director, Society of American Military Engineers. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Stas. You guys are awesome.
Thank
No,
you.
I'm serious.
Very much.
This is an amazing event. I just think it's a great example for everybody to try to follow. I mean, it is packed. So God bless you for what you're doing. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Joe, would you like to say anything else?
No, just thanks for the opportunity, and you will have our support forever. So,
okay.
And whenever we're ready to start, whenever you're ready to start the event, let me know, and we'll.
Okay. Thank you very much. Our second speaker is Jim Patty. Jim is the newly elected president of the International Propeller Club. Jim and I have just, Jim has just been our leader through our recent conference and convention, which covered a lot of interesting ground and may cover some more ground in resiliency as we go along. Jim, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you very much for your support.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Stas. And thank you to the Propeller Club of Northern California and the Society of American Military Engineers for hosting this conference. I'd like to add my welcome to all of the participants and to the attendees at this most timely event. The subjects you are addressing and the work that you do are extremely important. I'm especially pleased to be here representing the International Propeller Club of the United States, and most importantly, to convey our desire and willingness to work with you and other stakeholders as our industry and our country address critically important issues like climate change, rising sea levels, dredging, flood protection measures, and the impact of these and other factors on port operations, the efficient and economic movement of commerce, and our nation's supply chain. In fact, it is virtually impossible to turn on the news and not hear yet another report on the supply chain challenges presently facing our country. These issues, most often illustrated by pictures of vessels waiting to be allowed into a U.S. port to unload cargo, demonstrate very clearly the importance of addressing infrastructure in and around our ports and providing the funds necessary to expand, upgrade, and modernize shoreside facilities. If anything, the worldwide COVID-19 pandemic has brought to the forefront the results of us not having already acted to provide significant funds for dredging, to embark on a meaningful, realistic coastwise short sea shipping program, and to otherwise act proactively to prevent or at least mitigate against the precise situation we find ourselves in today. I would also submit that as we work to address the current supply chain crisis, we must not lose sight of the fact that solving this problem is not the end of the supply chain challenges facing our country. Consider for a moment that U.S. flag vessels, the only vessels truly under the control of the United States, carry less than 2% of all the commercial cargo in our country's foreign trades. That means, of course, that approximately 98% of U.S. exports and imports are shipped not only on foreign flag and foreign crewed vessels, but oftentimes on foreign state-owned and controlled vessels. It is no secret that China has embarked on an aggressive and incredibly well-coordinated strategy to enhance its maritime presence and control, and to increase its share of the carriage of the world's waterborne trade. Unless our nation acts to increase the share of our cargo carried by our vessels, we can, we may, and most likely we shall find ourselves at the mercy of such foreign vessel operations and subjected to their economic blackmail and coercion. Point is simple. We as a country can no longer pretend that the issues do not exist, that we can get by without addressing climate change and the impact rising sea levels have on our ports and coastal cities. And we can survive economically without being innovative and without taking steps to increase the utilization of smaller and underutilized ports to handle foreign and domestic commerce. That we can protect our economic security without having a strong, vibrant domestic maritime industry operating along our coasts and on our rivers, as well as in the international trades. No organization of its kind has as diverse a membership as the International Propeller Club of the United States, representing individuals located in ports throughout our country and around the world, who are directly as well as indirectly involved in or employed by some segment of the maritime industry. We stand ready to work with you and other interested parties in support of the proposals that enhance the maritime industry and are important to our country. Thank you again, Stas, for the invitation, and I wish you all a productive and successful conference.
James, thank you very much for those remarks. You and I really, I think both of us believe that the Jones Act and the Jones Act fleet needs substantial rebuilding, and you've referenced the need for dredging, which of course is near to dear to General Schroedel's heart, I'm sure. And Joe, did you want to make a couple of additional comments?
Stas, I was just going to add that, and I appreciate it. I actually didn't think we'd started. I'll be honest. That's okay. Yeah, I was just going to emphasize the fact that SAME's 101 years now of leading collaboration between industry, government, and academia to try to solve some of these issues is our commitment. And I think what you've demonstrated here today with your agenda shows that. It's not the government's problem. It's not the industry's problem. It's not the academia's problem on their own. It's our problem. And we've got to work together, find solutions, and then act. And we're here to support that and to support that collaboration. So I just want to add that piece, because I think what you've put together here, and I mentioned it earlier, is a great example, which we will share with others. And I won't go into all the other industry government engagement things that we're doing, but these are key. It's find the solution, identify the problem. We know that, find the solutions and make them work. And it's up to us. It's just up to us. Okay. So our commitment is there for you. So thanks, Stas.
Thank you very much, General. Arvin Acharya, President of the Society of American Military Engineers, San Francisco chapter, and my partner in crime for the last couple of years on these conferences. Good morning, Arvin, and thank you very much again for all of your help.
Thank you, Stas. And also on behalf of the San Francisco Post, I'd like to welcome everybody, and also thanks to the Propeller Club for being such great partners on this really excellent event that Stas manages to put together every year. One of the greatest things that we can support Stas and the Propeller Club in what we've been doing is we've been really reaching out to the body of interest that exists within SAME. And one great example is SAME National has a resilience group called the Communities of Interest, and I encourage people to join it or participate in it. They have specific expertise in storms, flooding, and sea level defense. Similarly, we reached out. We have to thank many of the posts who are participating here. We reached out to the California posts, Texas, New York, New Jersey, Hawaii, and Mississippi, Louisiana. So we really reached out to many posts, and they've been really very forward-thinking and have released this information over to many posts. So we've got the national outlook in addition to the community of interest, which is through SAME National. So I'm very happy to be participating in this event and look forward to hearing what's in store going forward. Thank you, Stas.
Arvin, thank you very much. Len Materman, Chief Executive Officer, San Mateo County Flood and Sea Level Rise Resiliency District, oneshoreline.org. Len, good morning. You've got quite a shoreline to protect there. How are we doing?
Well, thanks, Stas, for having me, and it's good to see you all. I'm new to this conference, and it's really a pleasure to be here and learn over the course of today. So I'm going to do a brief slideshow as part of a very brief discussion. And so the San Mateo County Flood and Sea Level Rise Resiliency District is the first countywide independent government agency on the West Coast focused on the climate change water-related issues. And we were established in January of 2021 because San Mateo County has the largest, is the most vulnerable county in California and in the top 6 in the United States to sea level rise. And in terms of population, property, homes, contaminated sites. And this graph on the left is from a study by Stanford earlier, actually the middle of the summer, and it looked at homes vulnerable to the first 3 feet, and in the Bay Area, San Mateo County has the most vulnerability, and the orange color indicates, or brown indicates that the homes that are vulnerable are below the median income for the county, and so our lower income residents are particularly vulnerable. So San Mateo County established this district through state legislation, and on January 1, and we work countywide. Here's a snapshot of some of the projects that we're doing, and Stas got exposed to our district several weeks ago, and he and I talked, and it seemed to make sense to bring on kind of the first agency that's working in this field in our area. And so we have projects along the bay. The ones in blue are the ones that we're leading on. We're partners on many other projects, and we actually have our first project already under construction that we inherited when we were established in January of last year as in a planning and design phase. I'll point out two specific projects briefly. San Francisco Airport, major facility, of course, has great vulnerabilities. They've had a project called their Shoreline Protection Project in planning and early design for years. They're now doing their environmental documents, CEQA documents here in California, and NEPA on the national level. And they have an area of their shoreline that they want to tie into the cities to the south and to the north, these yellow dashed lines. And that would obviate the need for them to do this long stretch along the airport in terms of creating a perimeter of protection for them. Meanwhile, the cities to the south, Burlingame and Millbrae, separately did studies on their sea level rise concerns in late 2019, early 2020. And they all came to our new district in January and said, we should align our protection so that it's consistent and connected between our entities. And that's really why our agency was created. And so we've established a regional project, not just on the shoreline, but also the creeks that lead into it. And our sea level rise assumption is 6 feet above the 100-year tide, which is equal to 10 feet above today's high tide. So we're taking the long view on this and looking at the areas where the jurisdictions connect. The project partners share the assumptions, technical information, environmental mitigations costs, and utilize each other's property jurisdictional rights. We're also looking at the zoning and planning of the cities, and we're working with one of these 2 cities called Burlingame to put sea level rise for the first time in San Francisco Bay Area into a zoning ordinance. And that zoning ordinance actually was discussed on Monday night of this week, and it will be it's planned to be approved by the city council in early December. And we have 6 other cities that we're working with now that we've established this program with Burlingame, so that sea level rise is a part of their general plans, specific plans, and zoning ordinances. Finally, I just want to add, there is a project on the coast that we're looking at in Pillar Point. And the reason I add this relates to the next speaker. And that is just yesterday, we heard there was a federal interest determination to look at the harbor area along the Pacific coastline. There is a harbor district. It's called the Pillar Point Harbor. They have actually a couple harbors on the bay side and here on the coast side. And there are federal facilities, these breakwaters. There's county area of homes and businesses. There's State Highway 1, which is a hugely important asset to the area, and there are state beaches. So there's all these different jurisdictions, and our agency is bringing them together to take a long-term view, because each of these different levels, federal, state, county, harbor district, they were looking at their own vulnerabilities and not looking at the overall picture and how the development over the decades has influenced their vulnerability. So thank you very much, Stas. If anybody has any questions, please get in touch. Our general email is info@oneshoreline.org. Thank you.
Len, thank you very much for that and giving us a view of the shoreline challenges for San Mateo County. Our next speaker is Lieutenant Colonel Kevin Arnett. He is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Commander for the San Francisco District. And Lieutenant Colonel, thank you very much for being here and welcome to the conference.
Good morning, Stas. Thank you for the kind introduction, and thanks to all the speakers that came before me. You know, I'm really excited to be able to participate in this conference and get a chance to give some opening comments, but also get a chance to log in and listen and hear the great set of speakers that you've assembled for this today. You know, as our nation, our world is staring down this challenge of sea level rise, what to do about the associated flooding and impacts to all of our critical infrastructure. You know, we obviously have a big range of options. Retreat traditional engineering structures and some nature-based solutions. And as we consider our choices, you know, I like to think of, you know, what's happening when we have some of these tidal events that are causing our studies. And remember and remind myself that this sea level rise, this raised level of the water is not like the static glass of water. It really instead it's a dynamic sort of flow. All right, so the water's entering our ports and harbors, bays, with some momentum and some velocity. And acutely as that's shown when it's a storm level event in the east, wetlands and other natural coastal features form both a buffer, a little bit of buffer zone, and an energy dissipating surface that slows down that motion, and ultimately lowering the height of the flooding that we can have associated with some of these storm events or king tides, those large tidal events. So this is really one of those big compelling reasons to really emphasize some of the nature-based approaches. And so in this context, as well as for purposes of environmental protection of coastal habitat, threatened species that are endangered from rising seas, the beneficial use of dredge material is a critical facet and is of critical importance to keep in mind. So I was really grateful to be asked to come in and talk about the state of the dredging program in the San Francisco Bay, to kind of lay out where we are, what we've been doing, and you know, the status of our efforts. In general, I'll say that this has to be framed in terms of the long-term management strategy that's been developed and kind of formalized the late 90s, early 2000s, with goals for how we're going to use the dredged material within the bay. Removing away from some of the problems that were posed prior to that framework, where the bulk of material was being disposed within the bay in an unorganized manner, in a manner that was kind of overly filling the bay. The strategy obviously laid out goals to do only 20% in bay, 40% in deep ocean disposal, and then 40% to be targeted to be used in beneficial reuse in an upland site. And currently we're progressing towards the end of our FY21 funded dredging in the bay. And in terms of the metrics, some of the metrics that we really focus on in our stewardship for the taxpayer, cost and schedule, I think we're doing really well. Over the past several years, we've been looking really hard at the program We've got our dredging timelines occurring within environmental windows, so that we're being a good steward and protecting the threatened species that those windows are there to protect. We got some better predictability when it comes to the timing and the contracting structures, and we're seeing, a better value for the taxpayer dollar, which is really, what we're charged to do for the taxpayer. However, coming back to what that other goal that the agency signed up to support, many are interested in knowing how we're doing relative to that 40% upland goal. And this is a goal we agreed to pursue. It's a goal that I'm really firmly in support of. But a goal, even that record of decision from 1999 notes, it has to be implemented as appropriate based on agency specific authority and applicability. And the Corps of Engineers is a steward of our federal dollars, implementing federal law and policy. And while I, in my current position, and I'm going to stop short of trying to tell everyone what I think we ought to do and advocate for any kind of policy. But I hope I can highlight where our authorities end. This year, we didn't get to 40% upland in our operation and maintenance, or a maintenance dredging, right? Federally authorized channels where we come in with purely federal dollars to maintain the authorized depths of different channels. But within the Corps of Engineer O&M program, we're policy bound to adhere to the federal standard, which requires that we use the least costly disposal method consistent with sound engineering and in compliance with the federal environmental standards. And unfortunately, upland placement is not the least costly alternative. And while we work to find appropriate ways to meet the goal that we've set, it's generally not attainable using solely federal funds. In new projects we have other authorities. We can work to find federal cost shares to do more beneficial reuse. But it's generally not attainable in those existing channels that are the ones authorized to solely use federal funds. This year we had a project, or a maintenance contract at the Port of Redwood City, where California state funds paid the incremental cost of upland placement. And we were really excited to be able to execute that project. And although the volumes that came out of that particular contract that were under the contract were low this year, I was really heartened. This is a significant step in getting more material upland. And this is the kind of non-federal partnership that's critical to this effort. It's similar to how other states, and Texas and Maryland, as an example, have been successful in really expanding beneficial reuse. And I'm really grateful for the non-federal commitment there. I'd like to take a quick second and pivot back to the wider problem of sea level rise, and just to lay out from the Corps, where the Corps of Engineer has a role of flood protection. I think there's some important challenges to keep in mind. Specifically, I kind of made that comment about how the water flows into the bay in a dynamic manner, and so the flow of the water and the heights at specific locations within the bay is interdependent based on the actual flood protection methods that we choose to implement on a location by location basis. So providing protection within the bay requires that we approach things with an integrated regional solution. A flood wall solution in one location has the potential to raise the level in other areas within the bay as the water comes in and sloshes around as the tide comes in. So this poses a challenge for us on a federal entity and as a region, to or at least from a Corps of Engineers perspective, to integrate a host of non-federal sponsors, including sponsors like was alluded to within San Mateo County, that might bring a host of vulnerable or disadvantaged communities who might struggle to provide that same cost share role that our structure currently requires. So I hope that to kind of plant that seed and frame that and kick this off on this larger interrelated problem we possess. And I'm really excited to hear this great set of speakers talk about what we have teed up. So faced with these challenges, I'm really excited that we're going to be followed by the keynote speaker, Ms. Jamie Lisenski, who will be discussing some of the best practices for beneficial reuse. And thanks again, Stas, for the opportunity to just give a couple opening remarks.
Colonel Arnett, thank you very, very much for that. And thank you for talking about some of the challenges that we need to move on beneficial use. And this is obviously a national problem and it needs a national solution. Before I introduce our speaker, I want to take just a couple of minutes we're going to do a short little bit of introductions because I've got a couple of minutes of time. And so, Jamie, if you can indulge that, I'm going to just pull a surprise on everybody and ask them to introduce themselves. So if you happen to be there, I'm going to start. Todd Crawshaw, introduce yourself one more time there.
Hello, Todd Crawshaw, Crawshaw Design. We provide integrated brand marketing for print and web, IT support, and web hosting services.
Thank you, Todd. And Peter Dreyfus, good morning, sir.
Good morning, Stas. Peter Dreyfus here with Watermaster North America. We are a global part of a global company bringing new technology to shallow water dredging.
Thank you. Peter Mull, good morning, sir.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for this great opportunity to join this conference. My name is Peter Mull. I'm the project manager for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Thank you, Colonel Arnett, for your great introductory remarks. And General Joe Schrodel, it's great to see you again. You may recall I was an action officer on your task force after Hurricanes Katrina and Rita down there at Fort Sam Houston. So, sir, it's great to see you once again. Thank you, everybody. I very much look forward to this great event.
Okay, I have Abby Mayer. Abby, are you there? Good morning, Abby.
Project manager for Jacobs Engineering in the Honolulu office.
Very good. Thank you very much. You're up very early.
Yeah, it's early.
Okay, thank you. Amy Andrus. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning. I'm Amy with Inland Rivers Ports and Terminals. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Amy. Andrew Smith. Andrew?
Good morning, everyone. I work for WRA, and we specialize in marsh and river restoration throughout the Bay Area, as well as permitting and GIS services.
Thank you. Eric Torreson. Eric? Okay. Austin Barnes. Austin, are you there?
Hi, yeah, thanks so much for having us. I'm a second-year PhD student here at Scripps Institution of Oceanography. We're working on some sea level rise problems. Thanks.
Very well, and welcome, Austin, and thank you for your participation. Andrew Smith. Andrew, are you there?
I think I just went. Is there another Andrew Smith? That'd be funny.
Sorry, Andrew. Thank you. Okay. Bill Davis.
Hello, I'm Bill Davis. I work for Ghirardelli Associates. We do program, project, and construction management, and I do the marine projects, and we work in the Bay Area. And I'm looking forward to, this is my second conference, and I enjoyed the last one quite a bit. Thank you.
Bill, thank you very much. Daniel Teak. Daniel? Okay, Derek Chow. Derek, are you there?
Yes, aloha and good morning, everyone. I am Derek Chow. I'm the Deputy Director for the Hawaii State Department of Transportation, Harbors Division, and I'll be giving a presentation later on today. Thank you, Stas.
Thank you, Derek. Let's see, Don Davis.
Morning, sir. Good morning, General. I'm a former SPN guy from a few years back. I'm currently with the construction arm of TRI Group. Interesting to see where we are now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Elizabeth Simon.
Good morning, all. I'm Elizabeth Simon. I work for Stantec out of the Sacramento office. We do water resources planning and modeling.
Thank you very much. Evie Wong. Good morning, Evie. Evie, are you there? Okay.
Good morning, Stas.
Hi, Evie.
Hi, I'm not ready for prime time view, so just say hello and thank you for this conference.
Thank you, Evie, and thank you for the sponsorship of CB Fang for this conference and your support as a board member of the Propeller Club.
Yes, I'm going to sit in the back of the room today and learn something. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Daniel Teague, are you, okay, I apologize, but my mic is not working. I am a civil engineer. Thank you, Daniel. Harry Usi Rauva from Finland. Good morning, Harry.
Oh, good evening from Finland. So thank you, Stas, for opportunity to be part of the conference. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much. And Jay Winkler. Jay, are you there?
Yeah, hi, Jason Winkler from Northwind Group. We provide full service environmental engineering and construction capabilities for the Corps of Engineers at all districts.
Thank you very much. Jamie Lashinsky, we're going to hear from you in just a moment. Good morning, Jamie.
Morning, Stas. I'm Jamie Lashinsky. I work for Boscalis, and I'm our Director of Business Development for U.S. Offshore Wind.
Very good. Thank you very much. Jason Bigar.
Hi, good morning, Stas. Good morning, General. I'm Jason Bigger. I'm a retired Coast Guard commander in the Coast Guard for 21 years. Just started with Collier's Engineering Design, a full-service architect engineering firm, predominantly on the East Coast, Midwest, and Southern states. But I'm interested in sea level rise and interested to hear what the speakers have to say today. So thank you for having me.
Jason, thank you very much. We have Kristen Durnan. Kristen, are you there?
Hey, sorry, this is actually Patrick Durnan. I'm on my wife's account.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just I'm out in the DC area. Just came from Monterey, but interested in the topics here, so look forward to hearing.
Very good. Kevin Policarpo, do you want to introduce yourself? Kevin?
Hello there. My name is Kevin Policarpo. I happen to be one of Stas's assistants, and I'm also a student at the SRJC.
And Kevin, you've been a real help doing a lot of the research and putting together a lot of data for not only this conference, but every conference since 2019. And Kevin, thank you very much for all of your help.
No problem at all, boss.
Okay, take care. I have Kyle Hopkins, who is coming from Norway. Good morning, Kyle.
Yes, good morning, everybody, and hi from Norway. I'm happy to join. Again, it's always an enlightening experience to hear so many different viewpoints tackling the similar problems from different areas, and I look forward to learning more today and talking a little bit about partnership and desalination towards the end of our time. Thanks, Stas.
Thank you, Kyle. Okay, let's see. Luisa Valiela, you are going to be one of our speakers. Good morning, Luisa.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. I look forward to all the speakers before me and after me. I'm Luisa Valiela. I work in the Water Division of EPA Region 9 in San Francisco. I work on Clean Water Act programs, but focused on San Francisco Bay.
Thank you very much, Luisa, and we'll look forward to your presentation later on. I have Mark Wingate from New Orleans. Mr. Wingate, good morning. Well, maybe not. Okay, Matthew Falcone.
Hello, everybody. I'm a first-year PhD student here at UC Berkeley, and I'm be researching climate and coastal resiliency. So excited to hear what everybody has to say today. Thanks.
Thank you, Matthew. I have Michael Mooney. Michael?
Good morning, everyone.
I work with Peter and Jonathan Dreyfus at Watermaster North America.
Thank you very much, Michael. I have Michael Gebman.
Yes, this is Mike. I'm here in the city of San Francisco. I'm the national lead for storm surge barriers and gates for Jacobs Engineering.
Thank you very much. I have Mike Herzik.
Yes, this is Mike Herzik. I'm with HNTV. I'm a senior hydraulic engineer and been actively working on bluff erosion issues down in the San Diego County for Sandag and the RTA. So I'm really excited about the agenda, and I'm glad you're all putting this together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. David Garakenian. Sorry about if I botched that one. David?
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the conference. My name is David Garakenian. I represent Hybrid Systems. We are a newcomer into the flood recovery and disaster area, addressing with our new innovation that has been debuted at Las Vegas at the exhibition show in 2019 and again this year in 2021. It's called CLEARS, which stands for Continuous Liquid Extraction and Recovery System. This is a unique, patented, completely made in America, proud to say that. And you guys hopefully soon will see this in the market. Thank you.
Very good. David, thank you very much. Rudy Simino, good morning.
Good morning. Rudy Simino from Louisiana Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority, CPRA. We are the lone state entity in Louisiana charged with implementing flood protection and coastal restoration. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of CPRA and looking forward to hearing from some of the other speakers. Thank you.
Rudy, thank you very, very much. I see Susan Ransom, my board of director member. Susan, good morning.
Hi, good morning, Stas. Thank you. Susan Ransom, Client Relations Manager at SSA Terminal in Oakland. We are the largest stevedoring terminal in Oakland, moving about 70% of the goods off and on the ships.
Thank you very much, Susan. And Susan Sullivan, I saw you somewhere here. Susan? Okay. Vince Geronimo. Vince, good morning.
Good morning, Stas. Good morning, everyone. I'm Vince Geronimo. I work for Mead and Hunt. Happy to be a sponsor again this year. And I'm in Oakland, California. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see Sheila Higgins. Sheila?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sheila Higgins with Towel Incorporated. Happy to be here today. We do land surveying and mapping and are working with a lot of the local agencies, cities, several districts of the Corps of Engineers on various sea level rise projects and flood control. We also did aerial mapping of the entire California coastline for the USGS. So that was kind of cool. And I'm really happy to hear all of the speakers today and interested in what's happening with sea level rise and what we can do about it.
Thank you very much, Sheila. I see Susan's iPhone. Is that Susan Sullivan? Or is that Susan Ransom? Okay. Jonathan Hurd. Jonathan, are you there?
Sorry, Stas.
Okay. Then I have, I see Virginia Dimitriou, a fellow Greek. Virginia, are you there?
I am here. It's Demetrius. Hi.
Hi. You want to introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm Virginia Demetrius. I'm from Arcadis. Hi, everybody.
Good morning. Thank you, Virginia. Okay, so I may have missed a few people, and if I have, send me a chat. I see Bob Roulette. Bob, I don't think I've introduced you. Go ahead.
Good morning. I'm Bob Roulette. I'm with Sapper Solutions down in New Orleans.
Thank you very much, Bob. Okay, So I am at 8:32, and I promised that I would try and stay a little bit on schedule. So we did get a chance to do the introductions. Welcome all of you. And I want to introduce our keynote speaker, who is Jamie Lishinsky, and you heard her introduce herself a few seconds ago. She's Business Development Director for Royal Boskalis Westminster. Her subject today is Global Dredging Best Practices, Enhance Beneficial Use Productivity, and Reduce Cost. You're going to see in Jamie's presentation a focus on an international dredging project in Singapore. And I would like all of you to pay attention to the huge capability that is deployed with the dredging, with the deployment of huge caissons that are 90 feet high, and 250 of them were put into position to build a finger pier, which I believe was about 1,000 acres. Jamie, well, I'm botching this a little bit. I'm just giving a little bit of an introduction. The kind of work that was done by Boskalis, Hyundai, and its partners in this Singapore project dwarfs what we are doing in the United States. And if we are going to get back in the game of resiliency and infrastructure investment in our waterways, the kind of work that Boskalis and its partners were doing in Singapore is the kind of thing we need to be doing. And if they can do it in Singapore, we can do it in the United States. And without further introduction, I will introduce Jamie Lishinsky, who it turns out was born in the same hospital that I was born in New York City, although I was born a little earlier than she was. Good morning, Jamie.
Thanks, Stas. Thank you very much for the introduction, especially the link back to Columbia Presbyterian. Excellent. So let me share my screen and get cracking here. All right. So can you guys all see my presentation?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Do this full screen if you could.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm actually now, bear with me. I am not a Zoom specialist. I'm a Teams specialist. So how do I do?
We won't hold that against you, Jamie.
Thank you. Let's see. Did I mess it up?
Yeah, it's under the power, the view. There you go.
Is this it?
Yes.
Okay, voila. Thank you very much for the assistance and patience. All right, so yeah, I work for Boskalis. I'm now leading our offshore wind endeavors for the States. But one of my previous roles was the design director, design and engineering director for the 2S Terminal Phase 2 project in Singapore. And I did it all the way through from tender stage through first couple of years of project preparation and execution. And it's a good example. It's a very tangible example of beneficial reuse, governance structures, driving sustainability, increased productivity, and ultimately that while you are utilizing more sustainable practices, you're actually coming in with a cost reduction on your project, building a better business case. And so a little bit about Boskalis. I don't think it's a household name in the States by any means. It's a stock listed dredging and maritime infrastructure.
Jamie, I'm sorry. That was, Jamie, did you unmute yourself? Sorry.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted now. So we have about 10,000 people in our company, and we have 650 vessels. And these vessels are ranging from survey vessels to mega hoppers like TSHDs, cutters, offshore cranes, things like that. We're working about 90 countries, and we work across 6 continents. And basically our key customers are in the energy sector, ports, and infrastructure. We're divided up across 3 divisions. So we have dredging and infrastructure. So you can think of basically greenfield port developments, island developments like the Palm Islands in the Middle East. We built those types of projects. Offshore energy projects. So think about renewables. So offshore wind farms, oil and gas platforms, things of that nature. And then towage and salvage. So the Ever Given is one of our probably most world observed projects of recent related to salvage.
That certainly puts you on the map, Janie.
Yeah, it was pretty cool, and thank goodness successful. So the forces that are driving our business, basically it's probably the same exact forces that are driving all the rest of your businesses. Many of you already mentioned these things this morning. So population growth, increased wealth per capita, driving global world trade. So still tapping in globally as opposed to regionally, the global growth in GDP. Ultimately, we are driving urbanization in our deltas. We are demanding more energy, which is also unfortunately driving climate change, but this is subsequently driving our energy transition. And ultimately, this all leads to maritime infrastructure, and not just maritime infrastructure of, for example, yesterday, but maritime infrastructure of today and the future, which means it must be sustainably developed. So there's different ways to handle this, and you can basically work from a business perspective, or you can also work from a governmental perspective. And this is happening for maritime infrastructure, for Boskalis' business, and I think all of us globally, in combination with sustainable development measures from both angles. And so one way that governments are driving this is they're basically bringing it into their agendas, their policies, and subsequently their requirements that come down into these maritime infrastructure projects. Singapore is an example of this. They have a zero waste nation objective, sustainable Singapore blueprint. And basically what they're moving towards is by 2030, they want 80% of their buildings to be green. And so they are not just driving it in terms of requirements, they're also trying to support by providing guidance and materials to support those developments. So they have a sustainable construction guide, which is focused on the beneficial reuse of materials, so recycling materials. And it's supported by the Building and Construction Authority within Singapore, so one of the key government agencies responsible for all of the land development. So an example of this, which is a tangible project example, is the Finger Pier 3 project. This is more formally known as the 2S Terminal Phase 2 project, which is, if you look in the image on the lower right, you can see the southern part of Singapore. And in the center, you see basically the terminals that already exist. So you have the classic Pasir Panjang and Keppel terminals and Tanjung Pagar terminals, but these are in prime real estate. So Singapore made a decision where they want to maintain their #1 transshipment position in the world. And they want to then be able to move all of their existing terminals out of prime real estate and concentrate them in the western side. So this is ship-based port developments on the western side in the 2S region of Singapore. Air-based ports are in the eastern side in Changi. And so that's the way they're driving it, and they're developing a 2S megaport, which has a focus on 65 million TEU throughput per year. Phase 4 is partially constructed. Phase 1 is under construction, nearly complete, and the first 2 berths will become active in the coming year. And then phase 2 is the largest of the terminals, and that's what we have a design and construct contract for. This project is 108 months in duration. It's a really long time for any sort of port development anywhere in the world. This is not a normal timescale for port developments that we work on. but this is driven by the supply chain. So actually, Jim, Patty, what you were speaking about earlier about focusing on supply chain and logistics, this is the driver for this timescale. If you want to be able to maximize your beneficial reuse of materials, you need to be able to wait for those materials to become available. And so this project is more than 50% of its building material, its fill material is coming from inland excavations for tunnels, roads, buildings, and dredging projects. So it beneficially reuses the excavated and dredged material from Singapore over the course of it's an 8-year or 9-year project. It basically it's taking in material for about 7.5 years of that period from these projects. It's also trying to limit its use of very expensive imported materials. So sand is one example of this, a key example. But sand and high quality building materials are still necessary in your critical building areas. So we're using about 12 million cubic meters of sand from the employer directly. We rehandle around 40 million cubic meters of sand from the stockpile. So the stockpile where phase 3 is right now in that lower image, that's the JTC stockpile. And we take about 40 million cubes from there using a TSHD dredging method. And then we also dredge the Tamasak Fairway, which is the main entrance, navigation entrance to the megaport, just on the eastern flank of the megaport itself. And that's going to account for around 11 million cubic meters of clay. In total, it's $1.5 billion project for base value just to build the substructure, so the new land, meeting the bearing capacity requirements and the wharf line. It's designed and constructed by 3 parties in a joint venture, an integrated, fully integrated joint venture. So Penta Ocean Construction, leading Japanese marine infrastructure company, Hyundai Engineering and Construction. Many in the States, they're really well known for the cars, automobile industry, but their engineering and construction wing is not too shabby either. They're probably one of the leading design and constructors of concrete products internationally. So the caissons, these are a specialty of Hyundai and Boskalis. So what is this project? This project consists of 125 million cubic meters of fill material to reclaim around 366 hectares of new land. So what you see here in the blue is everything to be dredged. And then this dredge material is all used directly as fill for this new land development. The brownish, greenish is the reclamation area. This is something that's slightly larger than Central Park in New York. I think it's around 340 hectares, Central Park. So this is 366 of new land. And the caissons themselves, which there's 227 of them to build the 9-kilometer long wharf line, are constructed directly on site in the pink area in the caisson casting yard facility. We also are building the last stretch of the 2.2 kilometers of the 2S Boulevard extension, which is the main roadway connecting the different terminals within the megaport. The soil improvement area, it includes the new land as well as the existing land. So it's around 400 hectares. And for reference, that's basically if you take 400 soccer fields, soccer pitches, it's about that. So there's lots of design and engineering work for this project. It would take me a very long time to go through all of it, but I wanted to just focus on a few elements that I think give a really good flavor, like a good taste of not just the methods that we're employing, which are basically environmentally and socially cutting edge, but also the materials that we're utilizing. So basically focusing on this circular building approach, the sustainable building methods, and also the requirements, the design objectives that are driving this process. And so I'm going to focus on the wharfline foundation, the caissons, the containment bunds, and the Portland soil improvement works. So around the wharf line, the 9 kilometers of wharf line, We have a caisson wharf line, but sitting underneath the caissons, we build sand quays. So we excavate the existing compressible clays down to competent incompressible clay. We have a 60-meter wide base at the base of our sand quay, and around 1-on-2 slopes going up. And our sand quay depths, they range from 2 meters deep to around 40 meters deep. And then they're backfilled with sand. Also, to give a bit of a reference point, going back to New York again, if anybody knows the Metropolitan Museum of Art, this building is the largest art museum in the US. Its footprint is around the size of 8 football fields. 8 soccer pitches. Sorry, I've been living abroad for a very long time. So 8 soccer fields, and it's around 5 stories tall. And you could fit 2 of the Metropolitan Museum of Art buildings on top of each other in our deepest sand quay comfortably. Deepest sand quay is around 12 stories tall. This is then backfilled with sand and vibrocompacted to a relative density of 70%. On top of the sand quay, we then build a rock mound, which is the direct foundation upon which the caissons are placed to a 10-centimeter accuracy. We then have a heel filter, which is also rock, and then we have a sand backfill. And the active wedge in the sand backfill is also deep compacted using vibrocompaction techniques. The caissons, they are each around 29 meters tall, 40 meters running along the wharf line, and 20 meters wide at the trunk, and 28 meters wide heel to toe. They're a honeycomb structure on the inside, so pretty typical caisson structure, which we infill with sand, which is also deep compacted. So each one of these things is around 13,000 tons when it's constructed in our caisson casting fabrication yard, which is used as a slip form gantry system. I'll show you a bit later. And then it's filled in with around 17,000 cubic meters of sand. Along the backbone of the reclamation is the containment bund. This has it's a multifunctional structure. So it's a sandy bund, which extends from the seabed up to +6 meters, which is the reclamation height of this new land. And it has it's constructed with around 16 million cubic meters of sand. And what it does is it serves as a backbone for surcharging, so for stability of the whole development while we're basically building it up. And it's a very large environmental measure because basically to the south of the megaport, directly across the strait, Singapore Strait, is Indonesia, and directly to the west of the megaport is Malaysia. And so it would be completely inappropriate to have turbid plumes basically being transported across to Indonesia or to Malaysia. So by having this containment structure, you can then comfortably backfill with clay to the north and the west of these bund structures, while you still do not have your key structure in to contain any sort of turbid plumes. And so what we do, the stability side of it, is that we fill one side up with dredged material and excavated material, and then we surcharge. That's first the north side, and then we do the same exact thing on the south side, and then rehandle all the surcharge material, and we have a closed material balance. So the remaining sand gets used as fill material in critical areas. So all the sand is in key locations. So the containment bund is a backbone, the backfill behind the caissons, infill in the caissons and the sand quay, as well as the cap. And then everything else, anywhere else that we can, we put in clay. So dredged material, excavated material. And then we need to soil improve the clay because a lot of it is very weak clay. I mean, a lot of the clay that we're putting in here is like yogurt. So it's around 4 kPa. Because it's been hydraulically dredged in many places. And so what we do is we utilize, for us, which is a really traditional soil improvement technique, we use PVDs, so perforated vertical drains, which we install down to basically the incompressible soil layer, and then up through the sandy cap. And then we surcharge with around 10 meters of sand on top for around 4-month periods. And then we flip-flop this sand surcharge around the reclamation to basically minimize our dependency upon a bulk volume of sand, but maximize the efficacy to reduce our soil improvement period. So you could have soil improvement periods that are 8 months, but that's very, very long. Then the 108 months would be difficult. So we focus on a 4-month soil improvement surcharging period. In total, we use around 45,000 kilometers of vertical drains to drain the clay fill. So how does this work in the real world? This is all design. Design is lovely and perfect in our engineering drawings, which are stamped accordingly, but we have to build it. So what do we do? So what we do for the containment bund is we utilize a TSHD. So this is the Queen of the Netherlands. She's the largest in our fleet. She has a hopper capacity of around 36,000 cubes. So that's, I think it's around 1.2 million cubic feet, if I'm not mistaken, that goes within her hopper. She dredges the sand stockpile to the south. She then bottom door dumps up to her draft, which is around -13 meters. And then the top part, she fills using a low momentum filling technique, which is called pumping over the bow. And what it does is it basically minimizes the momentum that's injected into the fill. So therefore it has a very high density fill, and you have then a maximum burial and a minimized turbid plume generation. And you can see for reference a couple of people standing on top of the containment bund. So this structure, which is around 5.5 kilometers in total length, is constructed fully utilizing these methods. And it has an accuracy of around 5% on the slopes, which is pretty good. So then for the sand keys, we utilize grab dredging techniques. We do this because we want to minimize the hydraulic dredging of clay, because we want to keep the competent clay that we do dredge, we want to keep it intact as much as possible, because we're going to use it as fill. So we want to keep the strength as much as possible. And so we use grab dredgers, but as large a grab dredge as possible. So each one of these grab dredgers has a grab capacity of around 8 to 12 cubic meters in a single grab, and they can dredge down to 60 meters of water depth. We then fill up the barges, which are bottom door dumping barges, and then this is a direct fill within our reclamation area. We have the rock mound. So we use a full pipe method where we basically bring the rock barges alongside. We then unload them. The full pipe then places directly into the footprint of the rock mound, and we compact, and upon which we can place our caissons. So this is our caisson casting yard facility. It's a double gantry slip form where we can we build the foot separately with formwork. Then on hydraulic systems, it shifts into the gantry system, the slip form gantry. And then we can construct the remaining 25 meters height of the caisson in around 7 days. It then is hydraulically shifted out of the slip form and then sits there for another 7 days for cure. And then it is hydraulically shifted onto our semi-submersible floating dock, which then is used to bring it out into the sea. It submerges, and then we float the caisson out, which is partially ballasted with water, and it has a draft of around 19 meters. And then we tow it either directly to its installation location and fully ballast with water first and then sand, or we store it in a temporary floating storage facility, which is on the south side of our area. You can see some of the floating caissons in the background of the image. And so we have a disconnect point, again, to basically minimize the impact on our logistics chain. And With our clay, as I showed you earlier, we are using our dredging spoils. So all the dredge clay from the Tamasak Fairway, from the basin, as well as from the sand key dredging, as well as receiving millions of cubic meters of clay from other dredging projects within Singapore and from inland infrastructure projects within Singapore. So if it arrives by barge, it comes in, we tell it specifically the drop point in a 20 meter by 20 meter grid location. It then sails to that area. It has bottom door dumping, so it releases in the location, and we have a survey pre and post. You can see the little survey vessel there. We have a direct survey pre and post to confirm the basically what we can recapture in the volume placed. It's clay. It also changes its volume over time as it consolidates. And then what you also see in this image is you see the efficacy of the containment bund as an environmental measure. So you can see the turbid plumes to the north, and you see the clean water to the south. So if you want to beneficially reuse material and you want to maximize that to minimize your dependency upon very expensive, high quality materials for fill materials, you need to have a very good tracking system of your materials, especially for things that change in volume over time, like clay. So what we do is, as what I was explaining before, is that we have a barge that comes in. We have a 20 meter by 20 meter grid, where we track all the fill material. It doesn't matter whether it's rock, clay, sand, we track it. We then tell the barge master, this is where you need to go to place your load. It then places it. We then have a survey pre and post to then confirm the volume compared to what we measured within the barge and what we can retrack through our survey once it's been placed on the bed. And we also survey this over time to determine how it's consolidating partially, and we utilize in situ measurement methods as well. And basically the key to the game for us is we have to have incredibly tight controls on our material volumes. So we have a massive combined survey and soils database, which is then used throughout the entire duration of the project. For the reclamation itself, so this is what you can see here, is you can see an image. The red is the partially constructed containment bund up to 6 meters above mean sea level. Let's chart datum in Singapore. And then you can see these in the image that's sitting above. You can see kind of the red and yellow lumpy layer, and that's the clay fill. And so we then build with the stiff clay, we build these intermediate bunds, and we then place the softer clay behind it between the stiff clay bunds and the containment bund to then basically fill it up and then track its behavior over time. You can also see the dredged sand key, the deeper blue to the north. And in total of the 125 million cubic meters of fill material that's demanded for this reclamation, 32% of it is coming from dredged material and excavated material from other construction projects within Singapore, so marine and inland infrastructure projects. And 19% is coming from our own dredging and excavation works within the project. So it's more than 50% is clay, which is basically historically a waste product, which would be disposed of offshore, and that is no longer the case in Singapore. It is 100% reused in their infrastructure projects. Ultimately, what this does is it leads to a lower carbon footprint, because instead of having to import sand using bulk carriers from the Philippines for 125 million cubic meters of material, you're basically utilizing local material for 50% of that. You're reducing your carbon footprint in that regard, and also you're minimizing your dependency upon these imported products, but you need to be able to create the logistical time frame and mechanisms within your project program to accommodate this, but you then ultimately can have lower project realizations costs, which make it an actual business case, a beneficial business case. And the future is 100% circular for Singapore, and I think for many countries around the world, including the US. So thanks so much for your time. And if you have any questions, just feel free to reach out when you have a chance.
Jamie, thank you very much for this. What is the timeline for the completion of the entire project?
It would be, so without COVID, it would have been in around 2020, 2026, 2027. And I think there's around a 6 months to a year, probably 6 months to a year delay in total. I think will be the result of COVID, but it's still playing out in Singapore as it is for the rest of us around the world. But that's the indicative conclusion date and when we would complete our handovers.
And this port is going to have a capacity of handling 66 million TEUs, is that correct?
Yeah, 65 million TEU, and the design vessel for the port, it's the new version of the Maersk EEE. So the Maersk EEE has an 18,000 TEU design capacity, and this port is designed for the future Maersk EEE. So it's a vessel that doesn't even exist. It's over 400 meters in length and a bit wider than 70 meters in its breadth. And that's the design vessel. So all berths, with the exception of one, have to be designed, even the corner berths, for this facility to handle that design vessel.
Well, I have a comment from Jeffrey Ladage. He says, thank you. That was an amazing presentation, Jamie.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, my pleasure.
All right. So if you have any questions, so I'm going to open up for just a minute here because I know we're running a little late, but this was really quite an incredible project. Does anybody want to send me any questions that they have? And I will we'll ask Jamie to answer them. Jamie, the finger pier is 360 hectares, and you said Central Park was 340? Is that correct?
The total finger pier is 400 hectares, and Central Park, I think, is around 340.
Okay, so it's each of these finger piers is bigger than Central Park? God, all right. That's how far we have to go, folks, in terms of developing our dredging capabilities for the future. And this is a real bellwether of a case study that I think we should really pay close attention to. Jamie, thank you very, very much for such a comprehensive look at global dredging practices. And I look forward to having you back at a future date. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Our next speaker is going to be Peter Dreyfus, Chief Operating Officer, Watermaster North America. And he is assisted by Harry Usi Rauva, Vice President Sales for Watermaster Finland. Peter, good morning.
Good morning, Stas. And thank you. Jamie, that was amazing. It makes us feel very small. The only thing we are similar to Boskalis in is that you are in 90 countries and we are operating in 80 countries. But we are bringing this new technology to Canada and the United States. But let me start with a brief history of dredging. I would like to show you 600 years of effort in under 2 minutes. So the development, if you could go to the next slide, please. Todd, are you there?
Yeah, can you see it?
No.
Is it 9? What?
We're still on 1.
Wait a minute. Let me figure out what's going on here. What the hell? So you're not seeing the forward slide?
We're seeing the first slide.
It's not moving forward. Hang on, let me get out of this. All right.
There it is.
Yeah, that's 3 or 4 if you could go back.
I'm gonna go back. I'm not doing the
Thank
full
you.
screen was working. Yeah.
And if you could make me smaller and the slide bigger, that would be helpful. I don't know if that's
Okay,
possible.
that should do it. Go ahead.
So thank you. So dredging really started in Europe with the development of the canal system, which was of great importance, but much dredging was necessary to keep these canals clear. The Dutch were early pioneers in canals and sediment removal. This picture is an early scraper boat called the Mole. And in 1435, it's mentioned in the literature. It's rather primitive. You can see the metal scrapers on the bottom. It's simply designed to tear up the riverbed and let the sediment flow. Next slide, please. So in 1597, we have a grab dredger, and Jamie used that same phrase, what we call a clamshell. You can see on the right-hand slide, the crosshatched item is a wooden clamshell, but this essential principle is still in use today around the world. Next slide, please. The French developed this pontoon dredger with power supplied by two men who you can just barely see inside each treadmill. It was ingenious but complex and inefficient method of scooping sediment. Next slide, please. They also developed the ladle dredgers using winches to raise and lower the ladles. This took a lot of manpower, was not very productive. Next slide, please. With the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, a steam-driven sand pump was used for the Suez Canal, designed by the Frenchman Bazin in 1867. A rotating harrow in the front is loosening the ground, and the resulting silt is taken up by 4 suction tubes at the stern. A variation of this design is being used today for deep water channels. Next slide, please. Now we come to the topic at hand, which is that flooding of coastal cities has become more frequent with more severe effects from warmer oceans, bigger storms. Billions of dollars are being spent on berms, levees, and deepening of tributaries and channels to try to control the waters. After 600 years of trial and error, we believe we have a significant technological advance for shallow waters up to 20 feet, using some of the methods tried over the centuries. And Todd, if you could hit the short.
Let me get back to the video here.
Okay. We have a 20-second video intro of what the Watermaster can do. Great, thank you.
Let me go back to the slides here.
Sure. Yeah, so the next one, please. So my name is Peter Dreyfus, and with my brother Jonathan, we co-founded Watermaster North America, dedicated to improving waterways to supply clean water in the US and Canada. We are manufacturing and distributing a 36-foot amphibious multi-purpose dredging machine for applications up to 20 feet deep. We are bringing new technology to solve a variety of shoreline and shallow water issues. Next slide, please. The Watermaster AMD 5000 is a multi-purpose dredger designed in the late 80s in Finland. We are in America now manufacturing the 5th generation of this Jones Act compliant vessel in Michigan. Equipped with a propeller, this navigable craft has not been available due to the Jones Act, which celebrates its 101st birthday this year and has helped maintain approximately 140 small and medium-sized shipyards around the US. Next slide, please. Multi-purpose functionality allows one or two operators to use a variety of attachments, much like a Swiss Army knife. Clearing waterways with these tools allows much faster recovery from potential flooding, whether from high tides or storm events. Next slide. This machine is amphibious, as you saw in that little video, in the sense that it can be trailered to a riverbank, raise itself on hydraulic spuds, and then walk into the water. Next slide. The Watermaster concept has caught on around the world for the past 36 years, and currently 400 machines are in use in over 80 countries in a whole variety of projects. The AMD 5000 is our 5th generation, perfected through continuous improvements based on customer feedback. Next slide. In response to more flood events, our overall purpose is fourfold. We need to keep waterways in good condition, prevent floods by deepening canals and tributaries, clean urban canals of logs and debris, remove invasive water vegetation. Next. A German company, Husker, has been installing massive polymer tubes to be pumped full of sediment and protect shorelines. You also have heard of Geotube, and there are a couple of other brands, but this is an effective, relatively cheap and quick solution rather than building very complicated engineering seawalls. Next slide. I don't know if you can really see this, but in the upper right, you can see that they have, there's a cross section of a beach erosion project. It's called Soil Tain Tubes by Husker. It's proven successful in multiple locations for coastal protection. With a covering of rock and sediment, these barriers have a claimed life expectancy of 50 to 80 years with quick and economical installation. Next. With a variety of attachment tools, the AMD 5000 can function in many ways as a dredger for canal clearance, a marina builder, beach restorer, icebreaker, and renewing tailing ponds for mining operations. Next. Standard excavating with a toothed bucket into a barge will go down 20 feet. Next. Invasive species such as hyacinths are clogging waterways around the world. Using less manpower and fewer trucks, tugs, and cranes, the Watermaster produces more work with much less expense. Next. The Watermaster can build marinas by pile driving, as well as installing interlocking sheet steel riverbanks with the vibrating Movax attachment. Next. Using a Caterpillar Tier 4 engine and globally available parts such as Bosch, Rexroth, and Parker Hannifin, the AMD 5000 is designed to be easy to service and maintain. Next. Marinas are easy to clear with bucket or suction dredging, where the sediment can be pumped almost a mile away without a booster pump in a 10-inch pipe. We are working on different aspects of beneficial reuse of the yield, including separator tanks of gravel, sand, and fines, as well as recycling the sediments of gravel pits around the country. Next slide. Clearing and deepening canals and rivers from the shoreline out will help move more tidal and rainwater to prevent flooding. Placing sediment over marsh and wetlands will keep those areas from going underwater due to sea level rise. Next. Watermaster North America has 2 offices, mine here in Oakland, California, and the other team members in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And next, please visit our website, watermasterna.com, to see the Watermaster in a longer video, and it's much more exciting with great music. And let me know if there are any questions, and thank you for your time.
Peter, thank you very much. We had one comment. Peter, I live in Raymond Crahy. Peter, I live in Detroit, Michigan, and would enjoy seeing your dredger. Where is it built? And it's built at, what's the shipyard?
It's Moran Iron Works in Onaway, Michigan.
Okay.
Near Traverse City.
Thank you very much. He's 30 minutes from Ann Arbor near Novi. And
great.
He's provided his email. Harry, I'm going to ask you, we're running a little bit behind schedule. If you could give us your overview of Watermaster, and then we will bring in our first panel. Harry, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you.
So, Todd, are you showing my slides?
Oh, hang on. I don't have your slides, I don't think. Where are they?
Okay. I have sent them, but
don't.
No problem. I can share my screen.
Yeah, why don't you just share your screen? I didn't have them. So
all right, hold on a second. Let me just go ahead, Harry.
Okay, so now you see maybe my.
Yeah,
there, it's coming up. Yeah.
Okay, so my name is Harri Utsirawa. I'm Vice President of Watermaster Sales globally. We are based in Finland, and everything has started from here. And now we have this good partner, Watermaster North America, bringing this technology also to US market. So I repeat few things that even this product is new in US. It has very long history. It's a very proven technology. Before Watermaster, there was no machine which can do all the works from dry ground to 20 feet depth. We have invented this machine, and we have invented the whole category amphibious multi-purpose dredgers. Earlier, there was several separate single-purpose machine doing the work on the shallow water area. 86, we produced first machine, and we have developed the machine during the decades, improved the quality, durability, reliability, all those things. And now, like mentioned, that the 5th generation is today on production. And because it's a Finnish-made machine, it cannot be used in navigable waterways in US, but now we have found solution that we are producing it here in US, and the same model is called AMD 5000, which is Jones Act compliant. And we have very long history, very good understanding of different markets. That all blue dots on the map are our delivery countries. We have 80 countries so far, and the bigger the dot, the more machine is under that point. And it can work in Arctic heat, Arctic coldness to tropical heat without any problems. So all these machines, most of them are still working what we have delivered. I go through a couple case examples, what kind of jobs are done with Watermaster globally. And first case is from Africa, Ghana, the capital city Accra. There is a Oda River running through the city, and there has been chronic flooding issues. And this is how the river was looking before dredging. Due to the lack of proper waste management, people are using river as a trash. They are throwing trashes to the river. And then there's also sedimentation, and together these are causing flooding during the rainy season. And for solving this issue, there was one big contracting company who procured totally 4 watermasters to solve the flooding issue. First, by excavating the harder, heavier, rougher material from the river bottom, they opened the area, and then it was deepened by suction dredging to increase the volume of the river. And this is how the same river looks after the dredging work was done. So very dramatical difference. So the reason why government took actions was that 2015 there was very heavy flooding after 3 days raining, and the river couldn't tolerate that amount of water, and there was a lot of damages to the properties, and 120 people died. So then they apply a solution with watermaster, and 2016 to 2018 over 1,250,000 cubic yards of silt and rubbish was removed, and estimation was that after the dredging, 2.5 million people for benefiting this non-flooding solution. Situation is now better, but because people are still throwing the trashes to the river and siltation is coming all the time, so continuous maintenance dredging is still required. Second case is from India, Chennai.
Harry, excuse me.
Yes.
I'm going to have to ask you to move this towards a conclusion, because we're really getting behind, and we had actually allocated 10 minutes for you guys. So
okay,
if you could maybe do this in 2 minutes, I would appreciate that.
Okay, I just quickly go through the pictures. They explain themselves.
Thank you.
So,
thank you.
Then Chennai, same kind of city channel problem. Lot of invasive vegetation, trashes. Here are pictures showing different areas before, after, like 1 week work, and quite big area could be cleaned. First by rake, removing the vegetation, then excavating the harder material from the bottom. And here, one machine worked 13,500 hours in 36 months and removed 2.7 million tons of different kind of material. And today, the same machine has 23,000 hours and still running. And customers so happy that they are procuring more machines. Last one is from China. This is a river restoration project where the area must be first removed. Harder material, there was some sort of construction debris and everything on the bottom, excavated those out. Then by rake, removing vegetation, deepening the area by suction dredging and pumping the material through the pipeline to the dewatering tubes. And the material was encapsulated to the tubes. And after everything was settled down, they are covered with soil and used for gardening and landscaping. And that way they create very good amusement park. And here you can see this area before and after the dredging.
Very nice.
And all of this was done by one watermaster in 20 days. So that's the big benefit of our machine, that you can you do multiple tasks with one machine, which deduct your investment and running cost and service and maintenance cost, and you get very profitable results with less money. And more information was from Watermaster NA. Thank you very much.
Harry, this is really very interesting. Would you do me a favor, since we seem to have had a disconnect? Would you resend your slides to Todd? Because we want to have them available, and those case studies are very interesting.
No problem.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We are going to go to our first panel, impact of flooding and sea level rise on ports and infrastructure. And our first speaker is Derek Chow, Deputy Director, Hawaii State Harbors Department. And his subject is proposed lock and dam system to protect Honolulu Harbor from sea level rise. And Derek, I want to thank you for being with us again, and the fact that you had to get up really, really early this morning to be with us. And welcome again to the Storms, Flooding, and Sea Level Defense Conference.
Thank you very much, Stas, and aloha and good morning, everybody. I really appreciate it. This gives me the opportunity to kind of highlight some of the great thinking that our harbors engineers and planners are doing. So I don't mind getting up early. But I also want to say that I appreciate the exposure that you've given us, not just with the previous conference, but also with the American Journal on Transportation, where you did that article. So that was very, very nice of you. So again, aloha and good morning, everybody. I'm Derek Chow. I'm the Deputy Director for the State of Hawaii Department of Transportation Harbors Division. And what I'm going to talk about this morning is how we're anticipating sea level rise impacting our area and how our engineers and planners have conceptualized how we're going to deal and adapt to it. So Todd, if you'd go to the next slide, please. So the Hawaiian archipelago is probably one of the most remote and isolated populated areas in the world. So we're highly dependent on the import of goods. We think that there's about 80% of the goods that's consumed in Hawaii are brought in from outside of Hawaii, which means there's about only 20% that is actually manufactured or grown here in Hawaii. And of that 80%, a good majority of it, almost 99% of it, is actually brought in over as waterborne cargo. So we're highly dependent on what we get from the outside world. The Department of Transportation manages 10 commercial ports. We have a different department that manages our small recreational harbors, but we manage the 10 commercial ports spread out through 6 of the major populated Hawaiian islands. And we are a self-funded entity. So that means everything that we have to use to operate, maintain, and to improve our systems comes from the collection of fees and lease rents that we have. Next slide, please. So this is Honolulu Harbor, and as I've shown in the previous slide, we have a number of commercial harbors on 6 islands, but this is the main harbor. Every piece of containerized cargo first comes into Honolulu Harbor. Majority of it, of course, with the 1.4 million people total in the islands, 1 million of us live here on Oahu, where Honolulu Harbor is. So this is the main harbor. Majority of the cargo actually stays on Oahu, but the cargo that ends up going out to the neighbor islands is broken down from the large container ships onto smaller barges and then shipped out to the neighbor islands. And I just want to point out here how the configuration of our harbor. So the original harbor was built by the early inhabitants of the area for both recreation, fishing, and other commerce activities. And the island that you see in the middle is a man-made island that was constructed by the Corps of Engineers when this harbor, as you see the way it's configured today, was constructed. But let me point out for now that the configuration of this harbor and the geometry is going to be very, very important to us in what we do in the future. Next slide, please. So these 2 slides show, excuse me, my dog's chewing on his toy in the back. These 2 slides show how we anticipate sea level rise and impacting the areas at the harbor. So the slide also shows the location of the airport in proximity to the harbor. And unlike airports and roadways and other facilities, harbors cannot retreat from the shoreline because we have to be able to service ships that are coming in and out of the harbor. But on the right side in particular, you see in the green and the blue, the area of inundation that's anticipated by a 6-foot sea level rise in the year 2100. Next slide, please. Now, the biggest problem we have today is the ability to maintain and repair our harbor infrastructure. In this particular side, we show that majority of our operation area is pier on pile. And so what that means is our engineers and our inspectors need to get underneath the piers to inspect the structural piling, but also the decking. And then once we determine that there's some kind of repair or maintenance needed, we need to get a contractor underneath the same. Well, with the sea level rising, we're going to have a difficult time getting under it to do maintenance and repairs. But not only that, as you can see, we're going to have difficulty keeping our operational areas out of being inundated by water. And so on the left side, where you see the different additional increments of pier, we've contemplated various increments over a certain period of time, but have determined that in doing so, these increments are going to be very disruptive to the operation, which means every time we go in the area to elevate these piers, we're going to have to shut down the operation, move them to a different location, do the modifications, and then allow the tenants back in. So we're contemplating a different method than just merely reacting to sea level rise. Next slide, please. So this is actually my last slide, and maybe one I'll spend a little more time on. But this is a culmination of the ideas and thoughts by my engineers and planners on how we're going to deal with a bunch of problems we have here at the harbor. So as I mentioned earlier, the geometry is going to make a difference for us. In the early days before the man-made island, it was an open bay. Other than the concern for draft, ships could come in and out of the harbor. But now with the man-made island, we have very distinct channels that we have to navigate through. Well, these channels, and like all other waterways in our nation's commercial ports, are owned and managed by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So we have to work with them in modifying those channels, making them deeper, expanding the geometry of them. So that's one of the things that we're anticipating doing in the future, because as the ships get bigger, as there's more cargo on these ships, we're going to need to increase the geometry of our channels and basins. So that's kind of shown in the blue as well as in the pink. In addition to that, because again, we have a bisected bay, we have a secondary channel to the left that's called the Kalihi channel. And today it's a shallow draft channel, and it has 2 fixed concrete bridges over it. So it really limits the airspace we have for ships that are trying to go through that channel. And we're also considering eliminating or modifying those bridges so that they can open up and deepening that channel so we have a secondary outlet as well. But the item that we're really excited about is the idea that we could construct a lock and dam system on each of the channels, both the secondary channel on the left and the primary channel on the right. And the geometry allows us to be able to maintain and control the water levels within the harbor through the construction of locks and dams at each of these channels. Of course, like anything else, we can always be affected by flooding and sea level rise through the back door. So we have to put in a series of seawalls, as you can see in the light green bars that are going across the bottom of the slide here. Seawalls that's going to keep the water out. What that means is we have to work closely with adjacent landowners, including other state agencies, city and county agencies, as well as private landowners, in them also doing similar kinds of improvements to keep the water out of their areas. Because even though we may keep the sea level or water levels from rising in the harbor, we could definitely be impacted by water coming around the backside of us. So what we're truly considering now are these numerous modifications, but the biggest and the most novel is the lock and dam system that we show here. And obviously, you know, there's a lot of details to what's going to go into the design and in the operation, and that's got to be worked out. Again, as I mentioned, the Army Corps of Engineers owns and maintains the waterways. So we were fortunate to get one of our congressmen, Congressman Case, to have an earmark in the energy and water bill that we expect and hope that it's passed in 2022 or for 2022. And we'll start our feasibility study on this major modification in Honolulu Harbor. So I guess the last thing I would say about this is, what we're learning, whether it's working with the Corps of Engineers or working with the other adjacent landowners, is partnership. And we obviously can't do this on our own. There's many other folks that are going to be affected by what we do, including environmental folks. And so we really need to work on improving our partnerships with everyone that's going to be affected by this project. And Stas, pending any questions, that concludes my presentation.
This is really excellent. Derek, you're right on time. We're going to, if everybody can hold their questions until the panelists are done, we will ask those questions at that time. Derek, thank you very much. Derek, one quick question. What is the estimated cost of this project?
So unfortunately, we don't have any other project similar to this, and we haven't done any kind of concept design and cost estimate, but just off the top of my head, we're thinking about $5 billion.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Amy Andrus. Amy is the Executive Director, Inland Rivers, Ports and Terminals, Inc., and she is going to be discussing the impact and response to chronic flooding on Mississippi and inland river ports. Amy, good morning.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon here in the central time zone. Mr. Crawshaw, do you have slides, or can I share my screen with your attendees?
Yeah, I didn't receive any slides from you, so go ahead and share your slides.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So thank you for having me, Stas. I want to say for the attendees on the call today, I truly appreciate the relationship that IRPT has with Stas, with the Propeller Club, of course, with AJOT, and his professional contacts, including Peter Dreyfus. I'm a huge fan of the Watermasters product. If you have an opportunity, please have those further discussions with Peter, because it is a really great company offering a really great product. That being said, I am with the Inland Rivers, Ports and Terminals. We call that the IRPT. I just very quickly wanted to let you know just a bit about our association. We are a national trade association. We are a nonprofit organization. We have members all around the United States and some internationally. So our members are ports, terminals, shippers, barge lines, short line railroads, truckers, you name it. We're a part of the supply chain that incorporates the river system. And that's just what it is, a river system. I definitely want to encourage you to visit our website, irpt.net. You can view the terminals, you can view our members, you can view the activities that our association is involved with. For today's discussion, though, you may be asking why a river-related association is talking with you today about sea rise. The inland river system is also known as the short sea shipping. Short sea shipping is crucial to our nation's economy. It's vital to the U.S. supply chain, and it fuels all modes of transportation. Storms, flooding, and sea level rise all contribute to a healthy, safe, and operating river transportation system. Unfortunately, the unpopular opinion is that storms, floods, and sea rise are new.
Amy, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I don't see your screen moving. I don't see the slides moving. Am I the only one?
I haven't moved them yet.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought you were going through your slides. Apologies.
No, that's okay. So I hope that you can all see the map here. Can you see that map on my screen?
We can't see it in big form. We've still seeing the first one, Amy. I think that was what Catherine's question was. Can you get it to number 3? Can you move that to number 3? Yes, okay, we can see that.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect, thank you. When I talk about the river transportation system, it's important to note This is the map here with color-coded rivers. Of course, we have the Mississippi, the largest. IRPT does, we do cut the Mississippi right around St. Louis, and then we say the upper Miss and the lower Miss. Of course, we have the Ohio, the Illinois, Missouri. I'm not going to read all of these to you, but every single river plays an important, crucial, and vital role to the U.S. supply chain for transportation on all modes. So I want to say, the unpopular opinion is that this is not new. Sea level rise, floods, and surge, it's not new. What is new is the way that our policymakers have made decisions that they, whether it's to operate and maintain that system, the lawmakers who are deciding to fund the operation and maintenance of that system. Each year, usually around springtime, our rivers, shown here on this map, will experience some snow melt out of the north, thus causing a spring level rise on that short sea. Unfortunately, in some years, what also happens is at the same time, we may have some, heavy rain and some heavy, systems that come through that also add to that already snow melt, right? So you may have a 30-foot swing in the level of that river from 1 week to the next. We've been experiencing this for many, many years. It's the way that the system has been operated and maintained, the decisions based on those policymakers that are coming down that affect or impact our system's ability to absorb the water. Unfortunately, that what we are also seeing is a increased frequency of those large storm events. We do call it an event. Sometimes we'll see 9 inches of rain fall within a 12-hour period. So when that happens, and I'll give 2019 as an example, we may typically on a regular year have a river, a part of the system that's at flood stage. Unfortunately, there are years such as 2019 where we may see 3 major rivers experience that massive flood rise, that massive river rise. When that happens, the influx of water along the lower Mississippi and into the Gulf Coast rises even more than what we would have typically seen. So the decisions that are coming out of federal and state agencies that impact the way this system absorbs is crucial. Just very quickly, I want to show you some of the statistics. You saw the visual map. I just want to talk very briefly about the statistics of what that map actually is. The river system itself touches 41 states. It is crucial to the entire US, but the rivers themselves touch 41 states that make up nearly 12,000 miles of river transportation. 236 lock chambers, the deepest being on the Columbia River at 110 feet. These statistics are coming from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, who operates and maintains our river system. So the challenges that we have with that major increase in depth of water do stem from some of the federal agencies, the regulatory agencies that might have permitting activities, whether it be because of dredging. Our continuous planned schedule of funding is desperately needed. Our Congress has not looked at a multi-year funding stream for dredging activities, for funding of rehabilitation for our lock system, for sediment testing. These long-term planning activities have not been happening out of Congress, out of Washington, and it's desperately needed. Communication and the strengthening of communication is desperately needed. When I tell you that we had 9 inches of rain fall within a 12-hour time period, the Coast Guard calls us and says, hey, let your members know, tie up your boats, get your equipment out of the water, make sure everybody is safe. We needed an effective way to communicate that. So what we did as an association, our gift to the industry, is we built a mobile app. This is not an app strictly for events. Hey, come to conference. This is, hey, there's an event happening on your river. So a navigation notice or notice to mariners will be issued. It'll be pushed through a notification on your phone that says, hey, there's an event happening. You can subscribe to receive notifications regarding navigation for the river that you work on only. I get them for all the rivers because I love rivers, but you can say, I only want navigation notices for the Pacific Northwest. Resilience planning, and this is huge, especially following a devastating 2019 flood. There's been no handbook, no toolkit, no guidance on how to prepare for, respond to, and ultimately recover from these events that are happening. So IRPT is going to take on that task. We will be creating a workbook, a toolkit with a checklist, how to prepare for some of this. What should we know about? What are some examples that we can learn from experiences for those who we follow? And of course, we look at development for Coast Guard regulations, EPA policies, and of course, government delays. When we enter into a continuing resolution and our government is not funded, that means all work is halted, equipment is demobilized and sent back to its headquarters. And when funding starts up again, we can now mobilize them again. And when we do that, we increase the cost of that actual project. So even if we did have a multi-year funding stream, if we don't get our budget approved by Congress and the president, then we're adding the cost on top of it. So what are paths forward to combat those challenges? We need an accurate, competitive funding stream for our ports and terminals to recover from those disasters. We're working on it. The Congress has introduced a port infrastructure development program, and that's wonderful. We love it. We also believe that private terminals should be eligible for that funding as well. We need continuous planned regulatory activities. How is the Corps managing the operation and maintenance of our system? Are they holding back the water in the reservoir system that then may contribute to recreation, right? If we look at the reservoir system on the Missouri River, what happened in years past was there was so much water being held back in the reservoirs to contribute to a healthier recreation community, that when those floodwaters did come and the Corps did have to release the water, then there was so much that had to be released that our farmers were then inundated, their properties were destroyed. So we definitely need a multi-year funding stream. We need the Army Corps and the Coast Guard and EPA to look at their regulatory practices. But I'm not here just to tell you bad news. There's good news as well. Even despite devastating floods in 2019, we are open for business. Our river system is operating at under capacity, and we can easily accommodate more freight on a river transportation system. I will also say further good news is that intermodal transport is on the rise. So whereas 95%, well, all of our members are river loading facilities, about 95% of them also handle rail. When we can incorporate two different modes, three, including the road transportation, when we can incorporate three modes of transportation at a facility, we can lower the cost for the shippers because we increase the competition. And so that lower cost for shippers will entice them, hopefully, to use our river transload facilities. I tried to make it quick. I tried to keep us on time, on schedule, but I'm happy, if we don't have time today, please email me, please give me a call. I'm always excited to talk about the rivers, some of our challenges, and always solutions.
Amy, thank you very much. Before we forget, Amy, can you send your slides to me and Todd, please? Because we don't have them. And we want to make those available. And we'll have questions for our panelists when we're finished. I'm going to ask everybody to try and keep to that 8-minute clock. So because we are a little bit behind schedule. Our next speaker is Dr. Lori Adornato, Program Manager, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA. And Dr. Adornato is going to be speaking on REFENS, developing self-healing hybrid biological and engineered reef mimicking systems. Lori, good morning, and thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Stas. So I'm happy to have the opportunity to share with you our vision for the REFENS program. We're currently in source selection and anticipate a program kickoff in the February-March 2022 timeframe. Next slide. So the goal for the REFENS program is to develop a completely new hybrid biological and engineered reef mimicking system to protect DoD personnel and infrastructure from wave-induced flooding, erosion, and storm damage. Of course, we recognize that this can be used for civilian applications as well. In the left-hand graphic, we show some of the challenges found with the current purely engineered coastal protection approaches, which are static, require maintenance, and can contribute to erosion. On the right, we provide a notional illustration of the REFENS approach that offers protection without those deficits through 3 main program elements shown in the small inset in the upper right. The first is the engineered base structure, which will attenuate wave energy while attracting reef-building organisms. The second involves attracting the non-reef builders that help to maintain the health of the reef. And the third focuses on increasing the resilience and plasticity to change of the reef-building organisms themselves. These organisms will settle and grow on the base structure and increase its height and complexity over time. We're focusing on oysters and corals because they deposit the calcium carbonate shells and skeletons that accumulate and help keep pace with sea level rise. Next slide. Sea level rise and wave-induced flooding threaten the sustainability of more than 1,700 Department of Defense managed installations in coastal areas worldwide, as well as the communities that surround them. So some notable examples of events that have caused damage to bases or when DoD personnel had to respond to disasters include Hurricane Sandy, which caused the DoD to mobilize a total of 24,000 personnel for infrastructure repair, debris removal, and power restoration, among other services. Hurricane Florence, which severely damaged Camp Lejeune, and Category 5 Hurricane Michael, and Tyndall Air Force Base is still recovering from damage caused by that storm. During our program, we have 3 technical areas where performer teams will focus their attention to develop their approaches for sustainable coastal protection. Next slide. So these technical areas are substrate design and structure, ecosystem engineering, and adaptive biology. We believe that the REFENS vision must combine technologies from all 3 technical areas, which we call TAs, to succeed. They include an attenuating structural system, that's TA1, a way to maintain that system, which is TA2, and future resilience for that system, which is TA3. Each of these technical areas requires world-class innovation. Next slide. The first TA focuses on the structural components, which will involve novel solutions in material science, structural design, and hydrodynamic modeling. Some of the considerations for this area are, first, materials. They should promote the growth of reef organisms and also be structurally sound. The second is a macrostructure. So this examines how the large base structure is designed and arranged to attenuate wave energy. The third is microstructure, and this looks at how the surface of the structure is designed to enhance oyster or coral settlement. The fourth is modeling and wave tank testing. And this is going to help us predict how the design will operate and achieve the wave attenuation metrics and affect local circulation when these are actually installed in the field. And lastly, the techno-economics. So this estimates what it will cost to produce and install this structure and how the cost of maintenance will compare with that for standard approaches. So by the end of the program, we would like for our outcomes to be competitive with existing engineered solutions to help with the transition. Next slide. The second technical area focuses on bringing together the supporting keystone organisms, needed to maintain the health of the reef builders by promoting settlement, reducing competition for substrate, and balancing predation. So this includes the fish and invertebrates that prey on the organisms that consume oysters and corals, as well as bringing in the herbivores that prevent the algae overgrowth that smothers and degrades both coral and oyster reefs. This can also include organisms known to increase or enhance settlement of corals and oysters on a reef surface. So it's important to note that we are only going to be considering native species here. All techniques must be compatible with and even co-designed to leverage the selected TA1 base structure approach. Next slide. The third technical area focuses on adaptive biology for corals and oysters with a view to improving long-term resilience. It's well known that rising sea surface temperature and increasing episodes of disease and pollution pose serious threats to reef builders. I'm sure you've all heard about that. The TA3 techniques for reef fence will focus on adaptive breeding and other approaches that can be permitted for in situ testing. New adaptive biological strategies for corals, their endosymbionts, and oysters will be necessary to ensure robust reef growth. Next slide, and the final slide is on biosecurity. The program has an ethical, legal, and societal implications group that's going to help ensure that any concerns related to these or public perception issues are discussed throughout the program development. This group will also help by building in safety from the program inception and considering environmental issues. And I'll be happy to discuss this with you further during the discussion section.
Thank you, Lori. You are a rock star here. You're the first one to state, and there's time flying. Thank you very much. We have a lot of very interesting. I have a couple of questions. I want to hold those to the end. Thank you very much for that. It was complete, comprehensive, and very, very interesting. It's obviously some very challenging things that you're talking about here in terms of really resuscitating reefs. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I mean, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next speaker is Vera Konings. She is with the municipality of Rotterdam, and she is a flood risk advisor for the city of Rotterdam. And she's going to be talking about regional flood risk management strategy for the Rotterdam region, for the urban areas, and for the ports. And Vera, good morning, or really good evening to you. We welcome your participation. And please remember, we're trying to keep in our 8-minute slot there. Thank you very much, Vera, and welcome.
Thank you, Stas. Thank you for the introduction, and good morning, USA. My presentation is about adapting Rotterdam area to sea level rise in the future. This is a picture of Rotterdam. Rotterdam is situated in the Netherlands. And we have a lot of water in our city coming from the river, from the precipitation, and also from the sea. Next slide, please. My presentation will first go into a short introduction to the city of Rotterdam. Second, I'll go to our regional strategy, how to deal with sea level rise. And I will end with how the port is currently working on their adaptation strategies. That is also a topic which has been presented the last 2 years on this conference by a colleague which I work a lot with, Joost de Nooijer. So this is some pictures of our city, Rotterdam. We are a delta city, a relatively small flooding along the river banks, as you can see on the picture. We have about 600,000 inhabitants, and with that amount, we are also the second largest city of our country. And we have the largest port of Europe, also situated along the outer river banks. Next slide, please. So Rotterdam is situated in the Netherlands, and if you can see on the picture on the right, all blue areas are below sea level, so large parts of our city are below sea level. And if we zoom in, Next slide, please. We see that a little bit more into detail. So the bluish parts are the areas below sea level. That varies between about, I think, till 18 feet. So the 18 feet are our lowest points of our Dutch polders. And the brown parts are the outer and higher situated river banks, which are not protected by dikes. All the areas below sea level, the blue areas, are protected by a large system of dikes. So the city is mostly situated on the right part of this picture, and the harbor is mostly situated along those higher banked areas on the left side. Next slide, please. As I already said, we protect that low-lying area by a huge system of big dikes. Those dikes have a probability of failure between once in 1,000 years till once in 100,000 years. Since 2017, we have a whole new flood risk management approach in our country, which defines this kind of levy standards, how we call them. And as you can see, all those outer dike areas, the higher brownish parts on the picture before, are not protected by the dikes. That's also less needed because they are much higher. And besides the levee system, next slide, please. We have additionally also a storm surge system with 3 storm surge barriers, which can close off the area when we expect a very high storm surges from the sea. Next slide, please. As you can also already conclude, is that flood risk management, because we are situated in this delta and also quite low-lying, it is of vital importance for us, and it's getting only more and more important due to climate change. So what we see is that the probability of a flood increases in the future due to sea level rise, but also due to soil subsidence, because we have a lot of soft soils with clays and peat. And secondly, we also have a lot of new developments creating that the consequences of a flood can increase. So growing amount of inhabitants, booming city, and also more and more business and new port activities. But with our regional strategy, as I shortly introduced, we can cope well with a sea level rise of about 3 feet. Next slide, please. But if we have more than 1 meter or 3 feet sea level rise, we have to think of new systems. And we are currently, as a country, exploring other possible futures than the future that we have, than the strategy that we have today. We are doing that, that is led by the ministry, but a lot of cooperation with our knowledge institutes. And with that study, we are exploring 4 extreme future scenarios for our delta, which you can see in this picture. The first researches a system of full protection with dams and high levees. The second, right above, says thinking about a closed open system with storm surge barriers, a bit comparable what we already have today. The yellow left below says, okay, we can expand towards the sea and strengthen the shore. And the fourth is mostly the most adapting scenario. And we are just studying these scenarios, but and that we can also think back of what we can do today given the 4 scenarios. And next slide, please. Now I'll go back to our regional strategy, what I have already introduced before with our storm surge system and our system of levees. And I will shortly share with you some details about that. The first is the way how we work together with developing and executing this strategy. We embrace this strategy with all the involved stakeholders, like the ministry, the Port of Rotterdam, the water boards, bigger municipalities, safety regions, the province, and so on. And together, and each party has its own actions to execute this strategy as well. And the second, what I would like to share with you is a little bit the details about the three-layer approach, which is within this strategy. The first is the defense is our basic, that are the storm surge barriers and the levees. Secondly, we are also more and more rethinking about spatial planning. How do we build behind the levees or in the outer dike areas? And the third is the crisis management. And next slide, please. I will zoom into the adaptation strategies for the outer dike harbor areas and the adaptation strategies for the urban outer dike areas. And I'll go into these because the last 2 years, what I already told, the adaptation strategies for the harbor areas are already introduced to this group. I will give a short update about that, and I will also tell something about how the city is working on the adaptation strategies for the urban outer dike areas. Next slide, please. So this is a picture of that outer dike area. All the blue parts are the harbor. And then we see on this picture all the blue harbor parts. That's actually the first update from the port. Do have a adaptation strategy how they cope with future sea level rise. But for the city, we are currently beginning with also developing these strategies. That are all the orange part on the picture. Next slide, please. So what I already told you, the port strategies are completed, as presented also earlier in this group. The last strategy was the Maasvlakte. Currently, the Port of Rotterdam is working on an integral strategy for all separate areas, but currently the flood risk management completely embedded in the Port of Rotterdam project management methods. And the next steps is really focusing on external communication about the strategies, sharing information and implementation of flood risk management in each project and design philosophy of also the companies in the harbor. So really going to the implementation. Next slide sheet, please. And I'll finish with a short introduction of how we are currently starting with also developing for the urban parts, developing adaptation strategy. And that's really different than a harbor, because we have to really think of what kind of city do you want to be, and what kind of urban atmosphere do you want to have. And we really have to think of, do we want to fight against the water and for example, making levees around that island, what you can see on the picture? Or do we choose to live with water and adapt the buildings, for example, to sea level rise? And one of our main challenges is how do we bring city planners and architects and the civil engineers together to really work together on this theme? So that is a challenge for us for the coming years for the municipality of Rotterdam. Next sheet, please. Thank you. Here are some websites for some more information for who is interested in that.
Ira, thank you very much. I really appreciate the this very quick overview of a very complicated plan here. And hopefully in the questions, we can revisit something. Thank you very much for this. And living with the river and living with the water, I think that's a real testament to the good work that's been done in the Netherlands on this. And thank you very much for this. Our next speaker is Catherine Roscoe, Senior Flood Risk and Adaptation Specialist at Deltaris. Catherine will be speaking about cascading impacts of flooded infrastructure and focusing on Broward County, Florida. Catherine has been a real help to us in bringing in several of the speakers, including our keynote speaker. Catherine, thank you very much. And I will cede the floor to you. Vera, the question is what time? We have another panel, and after that, we'll do the questions. And Derek, sorry, you are in your time, and I did not mean to diss you. You're always on time. Thank you very much. Catherine Roscoe, you have the floor.
Thanks, Stas. Do you see my screen? Just checking.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. Well, this is going to be really, it's short, so it's a bit of a teaser. So I did my best to make it interesting, but short. So this talk is really about cascading impacts. So these are the cascading impacts when critical infrastructure is flooded or disrupted. So the first thing I want to do is get my presentation to work. And the second thing is to answer the question, what are cascading impacts? Maybe this is obvious and maybe you haven't heard this term before. So cascading impacts are really the reactions that happen when infrastructure is disrupted in a way that it's affecting people who may not even have been directly impacted at all. So there's some great examples from the recent hurricane Ida. So I'm sure all of you know about the power issues that were faced in Louisiana. And there's a lot of cascades that result from these. I pulled a couple quotes from this newspaper article that I liked. It caused catastrophic damage to the power grid, forcing hospitals, businesses, and private residents to rely on generators or go without refrigeration or air conditioning, even as temperatures soar. So these are the—
Catherine, did you want me to move the slides forward?
Well, I was just bringing up the quote. Did you see the quote?
No, just tell me to move the slide forward.
Oh, you don't see my screen?
No. It's moving it forward. So.
All right, I'm a little confused. I thought I was sharing my screen.
Oh, I was sharing the screen, but I can get out if you want to share your screen.
Oh, can I? I'm sorry. Yeah, because I think I only sent you some PDFs.
Okay, hang on. Okay, go ahead. There you go.
Oh, okay. Can y'all see my screen now? You see the little quote?
Yes.
Come up?
Yes.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
So weird because it told me I was screen sharing. But all right. So these are examples of cascades that the hospitals are having, or maybe having to close, and the businesses need to close, and people can't get air conditioning. And these are all what we mean by cascading impacts. There's some other good quotes here about exacerbated effects of when roads are closed due to flooding, in addition to electricity being out. Road crews can't get to the area and restore power, leading to longer and worse impacts. And it says here it also affected water and sewer service, cell phone service, 911 service, and what they called cascading failures. So these are just some examples. This is the same storm up in New York, had tremendous impact on the transportation network. So everything was flooded, trains and subways and roads and even the airport. So what this project is really about is how to bring these impacts that we know exist when there are storms into quantitative risk analysis. How do we quantify what these impacts are so that we can plan better and we can better understand our vulnerability? That was the purpose. This is a NOAA-funded project that we just completed. And what I want to do is just show you that we wanted to build something analogous to a direct damage modeling approach. This might be a little too technical, but the idea is you've got flood maps, you've got maps of your buildings and your roads and some damage functions. You usually put that into some kind of model like HAZUS, or we use Delft Fiat, and output is direct impacts to buildings and roads. This is a pretty well-known approach. We wanted something analogous for these cascading impacts. And so that's what I want to tell you about very briefly. And the idea is that you would overlay flood maps on network maps, so road networks or electricity networks, and have a framework that will, in an analogous way, allow you to output these cascading impacts. And I put the partners in this project up at the top. So this is our framework. I don't have time to walk you through it, so I'm just going to pull out a couple of interesting features and give you some resources. We just before this conference did a webinar on this, and it's all in detail. So I put the link there if you want to watch that webinar. It was recorded, and it really takes you through this whole framework and also the outputs in a much more comprehensive way. But some things I want to pull out. One is that I'm just drawing your attention to a certain part here of the framework to show you that we did achieve what we wanted to, which is to develop a tool that you can use to do this this workflow with the flood maps and the network maps to quantify these cascading impacts. I want to pull out one thing to highlight is what we looked at in our application in Broward County. We looked at the road network. That was the network we chose. We looked at how flooding impacts 4 sectors. We looked at reduced hospital access of residents because of flooded roads, business interruption because of flooded roads, airport-related tourism losses because of lack of access to the airport, and port interruption. And this is due to lack of access, flooding of the access roads to the port, not the port flooding itself. So the other things I want to point out are some tools that might be interesting to you. So that at the top, and I hope you don't see what I see on my screen, which is all this Zoom stuff. So let me know if you don't see it, but up at the top here says circle workshops. And the first thing is really looking at a wide array of network disruption impacts. And so I wanted to just draw your attention to this circle tool because it's free, it's online, and it's really great. What it does is it allows you to kind of organize and visualize information about critical infrastructure together with a lot of different critical infrastructure operators. So you can get people from the electricity, people from the port, people from the water and sewer, all these people together to talk about their own vulnerability, but also how they are dependent on each other. And it's just a fantastic platform to do that. These are some pictures when we did that a few years ago in Broward County, and we reported on that. There's a paper about it if you want to look at that. The other thing I want to pull out of this framework to draw your attention to is the other tool. A really central component of the framework is called the criticality tool. And this tool is modeling networks. So in our case, it was the road network, but it's basically a really flexible model that's based on graph theory. And it's got these 2 algorithms in it that make it really, really great to assess critical infrastructure cascades. One, I'm going to go explain these in a second. One is we call find nearest location, and the other is called find isolated locations. And yeah, the edges can be weighted by travel time to represent roads. And it's got this algorithm in it that can find the quickest route between 2 points anywhere in the network. So there's just some features about it. And I just want to show you how it can be used to kind of quantify some of these cascades. So this is the example of the reduced hospital access. This is that find nearest location algorithm. And what it's doing is this black point could be the exit of a neighborhood, for example. And it looks to find where's your closest hospital and what's the optimal route to get there. When you overlay a flood map on this network model, then it sees that this optimal route is broken, is inaccessible. And so what it does is it starts looking for the next closest hospital. And when it finds one, it checks to see if it's flooded. If it is, it continues looking until it finds the closest accessible non-flooded hospital. And it looks at the travel time and the travel distance, and it compares that with the optimum to see what that extra time and distance is. And that's really important when you have people who really need the hospital. That can be actually very expensive if you take into account the risk of mortality by having delayed medical care. So this is kind of a little bit how it works for find nearest location. For that find isolated areas. That's very useful. As I'll point out here, you could imagine that the circles are residential properties and the squares could be commercial properties. And you've got your road network. When you overlay that flood map on your road network, what it does, this algorithm, it identifies parts of the network that become disconnected. And so that's these blue roads. Then it looks around those to identify, for example, are there any businesses in this area around these isolated road segments? And then, it counts how many of them. And of course, it knows costs associated because it knows the daily revenue of these different business types. So you can kind of estimate your impacts for businesses that way. And for critical facilities like the port and the airport, you want to identify, where are they in the network? So there's this green star that's in a connected part of the network, and you see this red star just show up, and that's in an isolated part of the network where most of the community can't access it. So that would be considered inaccessible. So these are kind of the features of the tool that make it really well suited for quantifying these cascading impacts. And then what I want to do, just to keep it short, I wanted to kind of hop over to a website. So we built an ArcGIS story map. I don't know if you're all familiar with that, but I'm a huge fan. It's like a website, but it's got great GIS features where you can put in interactive maps and you can have it tell a story by zooming into the important features. So we made one of these, and I just wanted to demo it for you for a second. I have to move these controls. Oh, that's better. And so you can see it here. This is the websites in the slides, so you can find that. And I just already kind of, I pre-loaded some views because you know how things go when you're live. But for now, these are kind of the sections, the methodology. I just want to show you this framework that I didn't tell you about due to the time constraint. It actually walks you through here each of the steps, so you can see that they start to highlight, and as you scroll, it's telling you about each of these components. So I really encourage you, if you're interested in how we did this, to just go ahead and peruse this story map. That's the methodology section. There's also another section which I preloaded so we wouldn't have to have any chance of it not loading quickly. That's this 2017, 2060 events. You can kind of see some spatial information that comes out of this. So this is showing you road disruption for different events. And I thought I'd just walk you through one example of the reduced hospital access so you can see what kind of information we're getting out of this. So these are the neighborhoods in Broward County represented by census tracts, and you see the neighborhood centroids. And what it's doing is it's identifying the hospitals in the area, and it's identifying the optimal routes. Here you see it in yellow. And then there's this example of this neighborhood here that normally would take this optimal route to its closest hospital. But when there is flooding on the road, here it becomes better for this neighborhood. Either they can't access this hospital or it takes too long. And so they get routed to this hospital down here. And so that difference in that travel time gets taken into account, especially for those high risk residents that really need the hospital urgently. So this gives you an overview. The red circles show you neighborhoods that are actually disconnected from a hospital. So they would need to be airlifted in this event if they urgently needed medical care. And there's the other metrics you can find in here too, the business interruption. I think for this group, the port is probably interesting. So I will zoom ahead to the port disruption. So Port Everglades is here, and we identified with a representative of the port where the entrances were. So you can see them here. There's 5 access roads into the port. And so you can see in different events how many of those remain open. So in the 2017 event, they're all visible. That means they're all uninterrupted. But in a projection, a 2060 projection, you can see that they turn red, which means that they are flooded and they are inaccessible. And so that is really an issue that the port wants to address and wants to have insight about. And we can think about the reduction in access, what that means economically. So we did that as part of this. And then if you zoom further down, you can see also the quantification of these impacts. This is in the same story map. I just preloaded different views to make sure that I could go in my time. But so you can see the impacts for a 2017 event and a projected 2060 event. And then if you scroll down, it kind of walks you through each of the impacts that we looked at, like business interruption. There's more detail here. The airport related tourism losses, there's more detail, and also about the port disruption. So let me just zoom back to the other. So I just want to show you that this link is here. So I do encourage you, if you're interested, to take a look. And the other thing I wanted to let you know is that there is a report documenting really all of the details, and that's also online. So you can follow this link and it'll take you to the PDF of the report where you can find all of the details. So I hope I stayed in my time, Stas.
This is, Catherine, you've done a really good job here. This is a very innovative concept, I think, for emergency services people. It's very, very important. The deployment of the criticality tool was a little bit above my pay grade. I think I kind of followed the use of the algorithms, very interesting. A quick question, in an emergency, how does anybody figure out how to get to the right hospital or the right fire station, or do the ports have access to be able to advise truck drivers on how to get in and out of the ports?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure for the ports. I think for hospitals, usually, I mean, I guess it's the ambulance drivers are aware. To be honest, I'm not sure in an emergency. So this is something we really want to expand the application. This was for planning purposes, but we think that there's a huge application for response and emergency management. So we're really interested in finding out these kind of things. How are people right now figuring out, how do the ambulance drivers know which roads are out, and, how is that communication line? And so we're really interested in following up about that and seeing how we could, this tool is very fast because it's this graph-based tool. So it's something that we really see potential in emergency management as well, that to have insight into which roads are out and how people need to be routed and which areas need to be also near real time. So in advance, which areas really need to be evacuated. This kind of application we also see as a potential.
Well, this is a subject for a whole further conversation, clearly. But
that would be great.
Thank you very much for this. And we have all of your slides, right?
I'm going to have to share. I updated them a little bit afterwards, and I think I only sent you the PDF, so I'll send you the latest slides now.
And please send us the link to the report. So Todd and I have got that as well, and any reference information, because I think we would like to distribute that to our port members.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll do it now.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Mark Wingate, I see you've been sitting there patiently waiting for us to get to you, and we did finally get to you. Mark Wingate, PE, Deputy District Engineer for Project Management, New Orleans District, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Mark is going to discuss his report on New Orleans storm surge barrier resiliency after Hurricane Ida. Mark, thank you for being with us again. And how did the storm surge system do?
Well, thank you, Stas, for the opportunity. And Todd, if you could go ahead and share my slides, that would be wonderful. I'm not going to attempt to share my screen.
All right, here you go.
All right. Well, Stas, that's a great lead in. So what I want to cover here, and I am going to try to stick to that 8-minute guidance here. I certainly want to discuss the New Orleans Hurricane Risk Reduction System. I'll call that HISDRS for short. Again, that's the New Orleans Hurricane Risk Reduction System. I want to talk about how it performed post-Ida and also look at what we're doing beyond Hurricane Ida. And I want to hit some of the resiliency components as well. Next slide, please. Well, as we all are aware, on 29 August 21, in fact, 16 years to the date after Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Ida unfortunately hit the New Orleans and surrounding area. It actually made landfall at a fairly major port, a deep water port referred to as Port Fourchon, which services oil and gas across the Gulf of Mexico. But unfortunately, along the path that you can see here that Hurricane Ida took, it brought in both storm surge, but also significant wind damage, which was just shown in one of the previous presentations. So significant wind damage along this particular path. I think the message I would leave you with here this morning is that it's what could have been. What could have been if action had not been taken post-Hurricane Katrina in 2005 for the New Orleans area. Next slide, please. And so I'll go back 16 years ago now. When Hurricane Katrina made landfall in the New Orleans area, the New Orleans levee project was not complete. It had gaps in that project, and certainly it lacked resiliency as well. And so this, again, could have been another New Orleans, Louisiana event, especially on what we call the West Bank, which is really on the lower portion of this particular slide, because of all those 4 red boxes. Those were weaknesses or gaps. And why did we have those gaps? Primarily because of a lack of funding. There was no strong commitment from the nation at the state or the local levy really to complete this project. There was not a system-wide approach, and it certainly was not only complete, it did not incorporate resiliency. And again, it's at those 4 red boxes that the storm surge could penetrate that system if action had not been taken in the 2005 and beyond timeframe. Next slide, please. So when the nation made a commitment, it resulted in the Hurricane Storm Damage Risk Reduction System. And so this was not a New Orleans event with respect to Hurricane Ida that occurred about 60 days ago. All the gaps have now been closed. We have fully a system, not just in name, but actually in performance. This was a fully funded program at nearly $14.6 billion, and it resulted in a system-wide approach with resiliency. And if you look at where all the pictures point to, and I'll kind of start at the top left, at those first 3 blue dots, we don't allow the enemy, that's the surge, to penetrate into our system. So we close those areas off with what we call the permanent canals, closures, and pumps. That was an $850 million design build contract. As we move to the right-hand side of the slide at that blue dot, that is the IHC surge barrier. Again, the water cannot get into the system. We leave the enemy at bay. That was over a $1 billion design build contract. And at the very bottom of the slide, we don't allow the water to get into the West Bank. Again, keep the enemy at bay. And that was over $1 billion, Western Closure Complex, the largest drainage pump station in the world. And that was actually an early contractor involvement project. One thing I will leave you with, right before Ida hit nearly 2 months ago, the mayor of New Orleans called my boss, the commander of the New Orleans district, and said, based on the latest forecast, it appears Hurricane Ida is going to overtop that southern green line and get into New Orleans. What's going to happen, Colonel? And we were proud to say, because of the resiliency, that's how the system was designed. If it overtops, it will not breach. It has resiliency, it has armoring, and it will perform. And we were confident in that. Next slide, please. So what happened when Ida hit? If you look at the top right slide, that is New Orleans. Not one drop of water got into New Orleans as a result of surge. The levees held, had plenty of freeboard, system worked as designed. We look at the bottom left-hand side of the slide, that is an area, I'm gonna come back to that real quickly, that does not have a federal system in place, and you can see the results. Surge got entirely into that community right to the west, about 30 miles to the west of New Orleans. Next slide, please. Just further reinforces that every red arrow, if we had not as a nation invested in this system, the $14.6 billion, Ida would have challenged this system significantly. Overtopping on that lower portion where the 2 big red arrows are, we would have overtopping in that particular levee reach and in the other areas of the levees. And we would have also had risk where we closed off Lake Pontchartrain at the top of the slide at the permanent canals, closures, and pumps. So the system, we had not made the investment, I believe we would have had another New Orleans storm. Next slide, please. But there are certainly areas outside of New Orleans that also need risk reduction. So this is a slide. Every arrow here is pointing to future flood risk management projects. I have all 5 of those projects currently underway. They're fully funded for construction to a tune of $1.4 billion. So it's not just the New Orleans area, but it's also developed areas around the state. Next slide, please. Okay, this is that area I was referring to a little bit earlier ago, about 30 miles to the west of New Orleans. You can see in the picture, inundated. This is the federal system that we just awarded the first levee contract just this month. In about 2 years, we should have a considerable portion of the system in place, and it would then be ready to significantly reduce risk in the event of the next unfortunate hurricane. Next slide, please. So certainly beyond that, this kind of gives you a snapshot of our entire district program. Of course, New Orleans is there on the right-hand side of the slide, but this is kind of an overlay of our continued investment in Southern Louisiana. You can see the number about $17 billion. And this slide really represents a large part of future funding needs. Some of these projects are funded, as I showed on a prior slide, to about $1.4 billion. And of course, the HISDRs at 14.6. But there are still significant needs in Southern Louisiana. So next slide, please. So where are these monies going to come from? Well, we're very hopeful in 2 buckets, if you will, right now. So the Congress just passed the Hurricane Ida supplemental. You can see there $5.7 billion to the Corps of Engineers. That's going to heavily look at 4 states. Louisiana is one of those. So I'm very encouraged and very hopeful that we'll receive additional money as a result of the Ida supplemental, as well as the pending infrastructure deal that we're all watching very closely, that we think will be competitive as well. And I want to wrap it up with one slide, which will be the next slide. In the aftermath of Hurricane Ida, we were asked to testify to the U.S. Senate Environment and Public Works Committee. On the left-hand side, you see there General Graham from our headquarters out of D.C. You see General Tickner from our North Atlantic Division, and you see our own commander from the New Orleans District, Colonel Murphy. And there were 4 key takeaways that the Senate EPW committee really was interested in. Certainly sea level rise, climate change, and how are we planning for that in the future? They really held up the HISDRs program during Hurricane Ida as a great model that incorporated resiliency. And I discussed that a little bit, and that's why this was not a New Orleans storm. And of course, the fact that we completed the program with full funding. And that really brings to number 3, informing future investment decisions, and really reinforces number 4, proactive investments now versus investing after the event. So just wanted to share with the audience today on those 4 key takeaways. And Stas, that completes my comments for this morning.
Mark, thank you very much. That's very complete and very comprehensive. And I thank you very much for this. We have time for questions. I have from Don Davis. How do we believe that $17 billion to save on medium coastal city is sustainable? Mark, that's obviously directed at you.
Well, the good news is I don't have to believe in it. I just have to report out the facts. And you know, ultimately, I see Don in there. Of course, I believe in what the science and engineering is what fuels and propels our reports. We follow the process, and if it's economically viable, environmentally sound, look at all the environmental justice piece. But there's no doubt 17 billion is a big number, and that's going to take time to find that funding. You know, just in the Corps alone, we have a $100 billion backlog nationwide. A lot of that's actually in coastal Louisiana and other coastal areas. But ultimately, Congress will, and as well, you know, the administration will have those tough decisions to make, and when they make them, we have to be ready to deliver.
Very good. Thank you very much. Vera, you talked about living with the water, and you had a big flood event in Europe this summer. Is this strategy working long term? I mean, is this a strategy that we can use to maybe reduce the need for building levees and dams and other physical structures?
So, do you mean that the strategy we are currently following will decrease the height of the levees?
Can you mitigate the need for levees and dams if you are using the river strategy? You living with the water.
Yeah. So certainly in the eastern part of our countries, we do not only raise the levees, but we also make room for the river, as we call that. So make the rivers broader, so more water can go through. And if we do that, the levees and do not have to be raised that much. So that is a strategy what we use in the eastern part of our country. But my city, Rotterdam, we are situated in the west. So we call that a sea-dominated area. So making broader rivers doesn't really affect the levee heights, because there's coming so much water from the sea that some extra meters do not really help. But in the eastern part of the country, which is mostly river dominated, that certainly helps. And I think on about 50 places in our country, the rivers have been made wider.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you. Okay, Catherine Roscoe, we talked about this, but one quick question. Would it be feasible to have this criticality program on an app that would be available on your telephone? Is that a long-term strategy?
I love that idea. We've got a whole development team that has a lot of vision that they're looking at when they do their development planning. So I can definitely feed that through and get their thoughts on that. It definitely seems like it would be incredibly useful. I love the idea, but I haven't heard of it, and but I'll get their feedback and see if that's in the works.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
So Derek Chow, are you still there? I saw, okay, there you are.
Yes, I am, Stas.
Okay, Derek, if you were to get the funding, what kind of a timeline do we look at for building the kind of lock and dam system you're proposing for Honolulu Harbor?
Stas, I think with systems this complex and this large, the typical Corps of Engineers funding schedule would be probably 20 to 30 years, or I should say congressional funding schedule would be 20 to 30 years.
And where would you expect water to be at that point in a conservative I mean, in your scenarios, will that be enough to protect? Will you be ahead of the water rise, I guess is my question.
Yeah, today being 2020, 20 years is 2040. Our first major inundation scenario is in 2050, 2060. So that would be just ahead of experiencing major inundation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Amy, are you still here? Amy Andrews.
Can I jump onto that
Yes,
comment by Derek?
absolutely.
Sorry.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah. Derek, just to clarify, so the funding would be allocated 10 years ahead of the event, right? So but you would still have to design and construct it at that point. Do I understand that correctly?
So assuming that stars align, of course, with Congress providing the funds for the Corps of Engineers to go through the necessary steps and phases, we would go through the planning, the authorization, the design, the construction. So all of that would be probably 20 to 30 years.
Okay, Amy, are you there? Okay, Jamie, since you happen to show up, one of my questions is what kind of dredging capability, how do we compare to the kind of dredging capability that you showed in your TUIS Singapore project? Do we have that kind of vessel available in the US, or are we anywhere comparable? And if not, do we need to get started building those dredging vessels?
Yeah, so so I'm not an expert.
Softball question, Jamie.
Yeah, so I'm not an expert on what's available in the States, but my understanding is that most of the dredgers that are available in the US are designed to meet the current maximum navigation depths within US ports, so roughly like 32, 33 meters, if I'm not mistaken, as being the deepest. And the dredger capacity is typically, so for the suction hopper, the big hoppers, they're significantly smaller and with lower production rates than what is being used outside of the States. So basically looking at the European and Asian dredging fleets, they tend to have higher production rates, larger capacity, so kind of double, I think, hopper capacity, if not more, and larger CSD, so cutter suction dredger heads, are significantly larger abroad than what's available in the US market, US fleet, from what I understand. And the dredging depths, most like the largest dredgers in the EU, for example, that are European flagged, they dredge down to around 90 meters. Yes, that's 3 times what is sort of market available, I think, in the US, if I'm not mistaken. And then, I don't think it's my place to say whether the US needs to build these or not. I think it's what the market demands or would benefit from. But if the intention is to basically meet sea level resilience and to maintain port functionality and expand it for global trade and urbanization, then it would probably be beneficial to ramp up the fleet a bit in that regard.
Okay, thank you very much. Mark, do we need bigger dredgers? Do we need to start doing do we need a modernization program for our dredging fleet?
You know, Stas, that's a tough question. And what I'll tell you is that we're working very closely and very well with all the dredging industry here. And there's certainly always opportunities, I think, to improve. And the dredge industry is modernizing and they're making those investments. So is the government. So I think we're coming a long way, and we just need to continue to work in partnership between industry and government when it comes to dredges. But it's more than just modernization, and that's a key piece. But it's also scheduling and working well with the contractors to understand what their requirements are, as well as the client or the government's needs as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter Dreyfus. You've been looking at this on kind of a strategic level. Of course, you have a specific product. Do we need to be doing more about building new dredgers?
Well, I'm in the shallow end of the pool. When Jamie says 90 meters, I'm a bit agog. But Jamie, what ship needs 90 meters?
Yeah, it's more for accessing resources. So borough areas to get high quality sand with less than 10% fines without disturbing basically benthic or benthic habitat. Some of the best quality that you can get is in deeper waters, where you then have a lower impact on the habitat that exists in that area. And also you stay really far away from sensitive receivers, so both anthropogenic and non-anthropogenic sensitive receivers by dredging there. So some of our best borough areas are deep. They're like 50, 60, 70, and up to 90 meters deep.
Thank you. That makes a lot more sense. So it's really about either you can call it beneficial reuse or you can call it mining the sea, right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's basically accessing the high quality material that you would need for components of your construction projects as efficiently as possible. So you can then basically look at both marine and inland sources and then compare and contrast in different countries around the world, which one makes the most sense.
So back to Stas's question about building, I think you mean larger ships larger dredgers in the US, right, Stas?
I do. And
Yeah.
of course, that, which is it's a sensitive subject because there's been a lot of discussion about that. But as far as I'm concerned, the work one of the reasons I wanted to have Jamie here is to talk about what global dredging practices and capabilities are, because we need to understand that. If that's what's going on in Singapore, don't we think in the United States that we're going to need to have that kind of capability somewhere, sometime soon, especially with the imminence of the kinds of risks that Mark Wingate discussed with Hurricane Ida?
Yeah.
And Mark, I'm taking you off you answered the question and I don't want you to get you in the line of fire, but I will ask Colonel Arnett, if you are still with us, if you have any thoughts about what we need to be doing about our dredging fleet. Kevin, are you still there? There you are.
Yeah, I'm still here. Sorry.
Kevin, I'm sorry, Lieutenant Colonel Arnett, not Kevin Policarpo, thank you. But Colonel Arnett, what do you think we need to be doing
Sorry, Colonel. Sorry about that, sir.
So, I'm still building more familiarity with that question, Stas. I think my gut reaction is, there are some modernization issues out there, but I've taken a lot of, dredge tours in my first, in the time that I've been in this job, and I've seen a lot of innovation in the companies that I've been able to visit. So I think right now it makes sense to me with what we have, and I don't know whether a concerted effort is needed to kind of meet the needs we have currently. But across the full spectrum, though, I know there are certainly places where we need some new equipment. So I think it's kind of a mixed question from my perspective. I do think that the commercial fleet are meeting needs really well, at least in what I've seen.
Very good. Thank you very much. If anybody has any other questions, do they want to send that to me right now so we can get those questions answered? Anybody else got anything that they would like to ask? Jamie, go ahead.
Colonel Arnett, one of the things that I wanted to, I think you mentioned it when you were presenting, but I wanted to understand what was the main inhibitor of reaching that 40% goal, that 40% objective for the upland?
So for the long-term management strategy, kind of formalize that goal. It was committed to as a goal, but it is addressing our core operations and maintenance dredging, which is not a new depth for a channel. It's just maintaining existing channels, and our funding stream for that it is not cost shared, so it's only the federal government funding it. And in our policy, we are required to utilize the least cost disposal method. Our aim is to maintain depth, and using the material is something that we get to do as a benefit. But our requirement is to use the least costly disposal method that meets engineering needs and federal environmental standards. And costs above that least cost standard have to be funded outside of the federal dollar. So that's the biggest challenge that we have had. So I highlighted this year's dredging within the San Francisco Bay Area. We had one channel at Redwood City where the state of California had applied cost share funds to pay the additional cost to go upland. And that's the big thing that needs to be supplied to make the current policy framework accomplish it.
And cost is assessed based upon the proposed selling cost. So like not the
not the complete cost, including risk and social environmental impact, but just the monetary cost in the selling rate for the work itself. Is that correct?
Right. In other words, we hire a contractor to get depth in the channel and to dispose of the material. And then if they have to go then to an upland site that's a longer trip, more time and handling to get into the upland site, all those things increase the contractor cost. And that's the hurdle we have.
Colonel, did I understand you to say in one of our earlier discussions that there's been some discussion about changing the 40% and increasing it?
I'm not. There haven't been any formal long-term management strategy for the San Francisco Bay discussions about changing the goals that I've been a part of. Nothing that I'm aware of there.
Okay.
Beyond that, we're certainly looking at where we have flexibility to reuse sediment. I tried to talk about some of the benefits of having from the ecosystem side, but also on the side that some of these wetlands are actually a really useful barrier. They slow down and kind of ultimately reduce heights, and they're a little bit better suited to raise with the sea, right? As long as we can continue to supply sediment. So there's reasons that make sense for us to look what flexibilities we have, and we continue to do that.
Okay. Thank you very much for this, and thank you very much for the panel. We really appreciate this, and we appreciate your time. We are behind schedule, but we have a break right now. I think we're going to do a 10-minute break and then come back. And our next panel is based on nature-based solutions. Luca Cittoni from Deltaris, Rudy Simoneau is from Coastal Protection and Restoration. You heard his introduction. Jenny Heyman from Stantec, and then Northern California, we have Peter Mull from the Army Corps and Luisa Valiela from EPA. So back in 10 minutes, and I want to again thank our sponsors for their support: Customs Brokers and Forwarders Association of North America, Mead and Hunt, Stantec, and Watermaster North America. See you in 10 minutes. Thank you, panel, very much.